Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 haunted cemeteries in Texas with dark histories, we step through the rusted gates of burial grounds where names are carved in stone, flowers wither overnight, and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling accounts of bells that toll without wind, whispers leaking from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps echoing across gravel paths when you know you are utterly alone. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers watch and leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Before we begin, share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there is a cemetery in your town that unsettles you, type its name. Because once you step past the gates of these haunted resting grounds, not everything allows you to leave. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. I never thought I'd share this, but I need to get it off my chest before I talk myself into pretending it never happened. If anyone from Austin reads this, you probably know Oakwood Cemetery. You might have driven past it 100 times. Those leaning iron fences, the twisted live oaks, the little marble lambs that mark children's graves. You might have even cut through on a jog during the day and felt fine. Daylight is generous. It edits out a lot. Night doesn't. Night adds things you don't want. I used to live off East 11th, a few blocks from Oakwood. My sister Maya crashed with me that summer because her lease fell through, and she didn't want to go back home to our parents. She'd just started a photography program at ACC and needed shots for a portfolio project. Urban stillness, she called it. I had a temp job at a print shop on Red River in odd hours, so I was awake at midnight more often than I liked, walking off caffeine and the leftover hum of the laminator. Oakwood was on my route. I took the sidewalk that runs the fence line, past the antique store with the porch swing that never seemed to stop swaying, even on windless days. The first time I went in after dark, it wasn't even my idea. It was our friend Tyler's. He bartended on 6th and liked to play tour guide on his off nights. He'd tell newcomers about the Congress bats or whatever. But what he really loved were the supposedly haunted spots. Driscoll Hotel, the old Seahome building, the Paramount's projection booth, and of course Oakwood. He knew the caretaker by name. Hector's chill, he told us. Just don't get rowdy and he won't call APD. Maya wanted photos. Tyler wanted a story to brag about. I didn't want either, but I didn't want to be the only one who stayed outside the fence. The 3 of us met at my place around 11. It was one of those hot Austin nights when the air tastes like pennies. We packed a flashlight, Maya's Canon, a thermos of gas station coffee, and a roll of bright pink flagging tape because Maya had read that you should mark your path if you're walking in an old cemetery at night. I made a joke about breadcrumbs. No one laughed. The gate on Navasota wasn't locked. Hector left it open some nights for people visiting late. We stepped through and the noise from the city fell off like we'd shut a door on it. Out on 11th, you could still hear a car downshifting, a bass line from a passing truck, laughter drifting up from a porch. Inside Oakwood, it was insects, our shoes on gravel, and a faint drip somewhere like a faucet someone forgot to close. The live oaks hunched over the stones and made the sky a patchwork. It felt older than it looks in daylight, like a pocket of time that didn't get updated when everything around it did. Maya went quiet the way she does when she's lining up a shot. Tyler did his guide thing. Okay, so cholera got bad in the 1800s, he said, low, like he was standing at a museum exhibit. There's a whole row over there. And the cradle graves, those little ones, you'll know them when you see them. People say they hear crying. Or the sound of rocking chairs. There used to be houses closer and... Don't, Maya said, not looking up from her viewfinder. Just let it be quiet. We walked toward the older section. The plots got cramped, stones shouldering into one another. Names with 3 middle initials. Lambs carved in white marble, smoothed by weather into almost featureless blobs. A patchwork of family names that used to mean something to this part of town. I kept thinking about people I didn't know leaving flowers for people they also didn't know. We passed a bouquet in a Gatorade bottle, a small plastic truck with one wheel missing, and a half-burned candle set on a concrete border, as if whoever lit it couldn't bear to let it die all the way. Maya tied a length of pink tape to a low branch. That way back, she said. She took a long exposure and whispered, "Hold still," even though none of us were in the frame. Tyler shouldered me and pointed to a line of flat stones no bigger than cutting boards. Cradles, he said, softer than before. We didn't hear crying. Not then, we heard water. That lazy drip got louder. I thought of a hose not fully closed, pooling into grass. I swept the flashlight and found nothing but a section of ground darker than the rest. It wasn't wet, just shaded. The beam hit something pale near the base of a marker. At first I thought it was litter. Then I saw it was chalk. Sloppy circles, a sun with too many rays, a stick figure with straight lines for hair. The drawn smile had been wiped and redrawn so many times it looked frantic. "Kid's visit," Tyler said. Like that proved it was harmless. Maya took a picture of the chalk sun. The camera's click was loud. She moved on to the little stone with the lamb. The inscription was almost gone from the weather, but you could make out one word clearly: infant. She said it under her breath, and it felt like we told a secret we weren't supposed to know. I don't want to make this more dramatic than it was, but I felt watched. Everyone says that, I know. It's the default setting at night in a place like that. Still, it was there. Not threatening exactly, expectant. When Maya stepped away from the lambstone, her foot brushed something that clinked. A pacifier, old-style rubber, brown with age, looped with a strip of ribbon tied off in a neat bow. It was clean. Too clean, that's weird, she said. Tyler shrugged. Offerings, he said, which was the kind of word you only use when you want weirdness to sound acceptable. He crouched to move it off the path. "Don't," Maya snapped instinctively. He froze and put his hands up like a caught shoplifter. Okay, we wandered another 20 minutes. Maya took pictures. An angel with a broken wing. A family plot with an iron fence and a tiny locked gate. An obelisk with lichen climbing it like frost. Tyler told us where people claim to see full apparitions. I didn't see anything like that. I saw spiderwebs like strands of hair across my flashlight beam. I saw May beetles ticking against my shins. I saw how the dew had already started to settle even though it was hot. We were turning back toward the gate when the tape was gone. I don't mean it came loose and blew away. The knot we'd tied was still there, neatly cinched around the branch. The tail ends had been cut. Cut clean like with scissors. Maya stopped so fast I ran into her. She touched the knot with one finger. It was brand new, she said, like the tape's age mattered. It doesn't fray like that. Tyler tried to laugh and didn't commit to it. Raccoon with craft skills, he said. We looked up at the branch and then at the ground. The two loose ends had been placed side by side on the dirt. Not dropped, placed, parallel. The only reason we saw them was because they took the light like two thin tongues. Okay, I said. We're leaving. It came out flatter than I meant. I wasn't afraid yet. I just suddenly didn't want to be responsible for anyone else's safety. We walked faster without calling it that. The dark felt denser, like the trees had leaned in. The drip sound followed, or maybe it just echoed weird. We passed the chalk drawings again, and I noticed more of them, half hidden under blades of grass. A circle of circles, a messy star, and a smear that might have been a little hand sliding sideways. Maya raised the camera without looking through the viewfinder and shot 3 times from the hip, like she wanted to take the proof and move on. At the road, we saw a beam skim our ankles. For a second I thought it was a car from outside the fence, but the angle was wrong. A flashlight low, someone walking with it down near their knee. We froze, and then I was aware of how we must look. 3 adults, one with a camera, skulking among graves. "Hector?" Tyler called. No answer. The beam clicked off. The drip became a tick, like a pocket watch catching time and letting it go. Catching time and letting it go. We reached the gate and found it shut. Not locked, just pulled close so the iron met iron with a soft, almost polite touch. I put my fingers through the bars and pulled it open. It scraped the brick a little. "Sorry," I said to no one in particular. My mouth was dry. The 3 of us stepped onto 11th Street and waited for the city to fold back around us. It did, but not all the way. Walking home, I kept seeing those parallel pieces of tape, like the cemetery had returned what we'd brought in but refused to release it in the same shape. That should have been that. It wasn't. The next morning, Maya dumped her card onto my laptop. We scrolled through in the kitchen while coffee burned in the percolator. 100 shots of stone and tree and shadow. A lot came out soft. She'd been shooting in low light without a tripod. She liked the blur in some of them. She said it felt like breath. Then we got to the 3 shots she'd taken of the chalk sun and the lamb grave when we were on our way out. In the first, the chalk looked fresh. In the second, a damp smudge ran through the middle like a wipe from a palm. In the third, there were no chalk lines, just darker grass and a faint suggestion that something had been there. The sun gone like the ground took it back. Maya's face had that flat expression she gets when she's trying not to give away. That she's spooked. Tyler said, "Glare?" and immediately seemed embarrassed by the word. I leaned in so close my breath fogged the screen. "There's dew," I said. "There's dew on the last one. It would smear chalk, right?" It sounded more like a question than I wanted. We kept clicking. Somewhere between the lamb grave and the little iron-gated family plot, there was a photo that made me sit back. A long exposure, 30 seconds maybe, while Maya had kept the camera low to the ground. The stones were crisp and solid. Across them, faint and almost a trick of the eyes, were tracks. Not footprints, handprints, small with the fingers splayed. A staggered row of them, low as if a kid had been crawling fast through the grass and keeping as quiet as they could. They overlapped in places like someone unsure of where to go. Tyler raised both hands like, "I'm not touching this." Maya looked for the XIF data and read out the time and settings and location, like a charm that could undo things. "That's where the tape was," she said finally, and we let the percolator burn until it clicked itself off from boredom. I told myself we'd misread the images. Art school nerves, pareidolia, light places turning into shapes our brains want to see. Maya didn't say anything. She put her card back in her case like it was made of glass. That afternoon she met her class, presented different shots, didn't mention the handprints. Tyler texted me a photo from 6th of a margarita the size of his head and said, "I'll tell Hector we were there." All good. We went back 2 nights later because that's what people do in these stories even when they know better. It wasn't even a dare. Maya wanted one more long exposure with a tripod to clean it up. "If I don't, my brain will fill in worse things," she said. I understood. Tyler didn't come. He'd picked up a shift. It was just me and Maya and the cricket sawing dark. We brought better gear, 2 headlamps, the tripod, and a small cloth to cover the camera so the lens wouldn't fog. The gate was open again. I said Hector must have come around. Maya said maybe he never closed it. We stepped in. The drip was there right away, fuller now. Not a single drip but a slow plink-plink, the way rain gutters sound when they're down to their last thread of water. The air felt heavier, like we'd stepped into wet wool. Maya led. The tape branch was easy to find. The knot was still there. I don't know why I checked, but I ran a finger under the knot and felt something cold kiss my skin. Metal. A safety pin, the kind you use for diapers or to secure a needlebook. It had been looped through the tape and closed with its little hook tucked away. I kept one hand under the knot and one hand on my flashlight. The beam trembled. We didn't put that pin there. I waited for Maya to say we had and excuse my memory. She didn't. She said nothing at all. The chalk sunspot was a dull patch of dirt. No chalk, no smear. Just a feeling like we were standing where people shouldn't stand. Maya set the tripod, balanced the camera, and took a breath. 2 minutes, she said. I need a clean 2 minutes. I stood a few feet away with my light pointed down, trying not to blink too much so my ears would work. The drip kept time. Somewhere near the fence, a dog barked twice and stopped, like it changed its mind mid-warning. Halfway through the exposure, I felt the air change. If you've ever stood on a porch in Texas before a storm, you know it. The taste of tin, the sudden weight on your shoulders. I turned my headlamp off because it felt too bright. Maya whispered, "Don't move." Not to me, I think, but to whatever made the leaves to our left lift and shiver without any wind. I held my breath. The plink-plink didn't stop. It got closer. I thought of someone carrying a glass of water and trying not to spill any. When the shutter clicked closed, the sound was soft but final. Maya draped the cloth over the lens and closed her eyes for a second, like a swimmer about to take a breath. We stayed there longer than we needed to, listening to the slow drip that felt like it was in our bones. Then something tiny tugged the edge of the cloth. Not a gust, not gravity. A tug, twice, the way a kid takes your sleeve to make sure you're looking. Maya's hand snapped out and pinned the cloth to the camera with her palm. "No," she said, to the night, to the drip, to the small hand I was certain wasn't my imagination. "Please, no." She lifted the cloth herself and packed the camera with jerky, practiced care. "We're done," she said. She didn't look at the branch where the tape was pinned. I made myself look. The safety pin was open now, the point glinting up at us, catching my headlamp in one hard white flare. We left without talking. Back in my apartment, we locked the door out of habit. Maya downloaded the photos, then went silent. I stood behind her chair. The long exposure was crisp. The angles made sense. The lens didn't fog. The ground around the limestone carried the dew like glitter. Across it, again, were handprints. Smaller, more of them, as if 2 or 3 had moved together. Near the base of the stone, the dew was wiped in a little arc that exactly matched the width of a small palm pushed and pivoted. On the far edge, out of the main beam, lay something round. Maya zoomed. It was the pacifier. The ribbon was untied now, ends parallel like the tape. We didn't go back a third time. We told ourselves we had enough. That's not why. A week went by. Maya slept light, then not at all, then heavy as if she'd outsprinted something. I'd wake up and stand in the hall and listen to her breathing, steady and slow, and fight the urge to wake her because I was more scared of hearing her stop. On Friday, Tyler came by after a shift with a plastic sack of breakfast tacos and a grin that didn't quite land. "I talked to Hector," he said. "He said he didn't see you that night." He shrugged like it was a non-thing, but he'd come all the way over to say it. "Maybe he went around a different section," I said. Tyler sat at our small table and lined up the salsas like chess pieces. He said something, though, he added reluctantly, like he was trying it on to see if it fit. He said people leave things there and sometimes they don't take them when they go. And sometimes something else takes them instead. Maya said, "Takes what?" And Tyler stalled out mid-sentence. "You know," he said. "Luck, peace, sleep." He made a joke out of it that didn't have any air in it, then asked to see the photos. We showed him. He didn't have any clever, and I liked him more for that. The next morning our neighbor knocked. Ms. Flores was in her 70s, lived downstairs with a parrot she claimed didn't belong to her, and had a steady supply of baked goods at all times. She held a foil-covered plate of conchas and looked like she wanted to pray for us, but didn't know which prayer fit. "I don't mean to bother," she said, "but did you have a child here last night?" I heard Maya stop moving in the kitchen. "What do you mean?" I asked. Ms. Flores pinched her lips, then opened them. "I heard crying," she said. "Soft, not like pain. Like tired. It made me wake up, that's all." She paused. "I thought of you. You leave the lamp on." She gestured vaguely toward my bedroom window. "We didn't have any children over." "We don't have a child, we said so." She nodded and touched the plate to my chest as if to hand me something heavier. "It's probably the parrot," she said. "He hears the neighbor's baby and thinks he can call the baby over." The parrot's cage had been empty since March. After she left, I went to my room and looked at the window. The glass had fogged in the night and dried in a lace of streaks. Near the bottom edge, printed clear as a stamp, were small handprints, not on the inside. Outside, the kind you'd see if a kid pressed their hands to look in. The left one was smeared a little at the palm, like they'd slid down a bit before letting go. I cleaned the glass without calling Maya over. I didn't want to see her face when she saw it. "Are you seeing a pattern?" Because I was starting to. Chalk wiped away, tape cut and returned. Safety pin opened but not removed. Ribbon untied and placed. Parallel ends. That word Tyler had used, offerings, kept walking circles around my head until it wore a path. We tried being sensible. We bought nightlights. We left the hallway bathroom tap dripping a hair, because a friend once told me a tiny sound inside the house could drown out a big sound outside it. We didn't talk about the cemetery. We talked about groceries and whether the AC filter needed changing, and if Maya should switch lenses for better low-light performance. The mundane is powerful, but it requires belief. It kept failing. Maya started moving things in her sleep. I'd wake to the sound of her in the kitchen and find her standing barefoot with her hands pressed to the fridge like she was waiting to be let in. She never remembered in the morning. I started sleeping on the couch to be between her and the front door. Twice I woke to the door chain caught but the deadbolt open. I don't sleepwalk. I don't know if she does. She never did before. In the middle of this, the city did what it does. A cop car slid down our street at 2 a.m. and sat idling under a streetlight long enough to make everyone twitch their curtains. A couple on bikes laughed too loudly at nothing and rode the wrong way up 11th. The porch swing at the antique store swayed under nobody. The everyday noise tried to convince us that any other noise wasn't there. A week later, Maya asked me if I'd tied ribbons on anything. I hadn't. She took me to the bathroom. On the towel hook was a ribbon, pink. The exact shade of the tape we'd brought to Oakwood, but not tape. Soft, fraying at the edges. Someone had tied it in a bow that made my stomach drop. The loops weren't even. It was the kind of bow a child learns first, tight seesawing between too small and too big. The ends hung parallel. I untied it and held it flat in my palm. It smelled faintly of something old, that sweet rubbery scent of vintage baby things people collect. I felt stupid for noticing a smell. I lay the ribbon on the counter and we stood there like we thought it might move. It didn't. Not while we looked. Tyler came by again because I asked him to. I didn't want to go to the cemetery. I wanted him to talk to Hector again. Ask him to check on the cradle section, I said. Ask him. I don't know. Ask him if he's seen kids. Tyler nodded and did that thing where he tries to make light of everything so it floats long enough to carry you. Sure, little Ghost Scouts, merit badge and knot tying. He left and I realized I wasn't laughing because it wasn't funny, and also because it made it more real that he believed me enough to go. He texted from the gate 20 minutes later. Hector says he doesn't go at night alone anymore. The text read. A minute passed and then another text, as if he'd had to look down at his phone, think about his next words, and accept that he was typing them. He says sometimes the tape doesn't help. We didn't go back, that should be the end, right? See something you shouldn't, get spooked, tell yourself a better story, don't stir it again. But the thing about some places is they settle into you like grit. You can pretend it's gone until your eyes sting, and then you still have to flush it out. In the middle of the month, I woke to a sound that didn't belong in my apartment. A creak, slow and measured, like someone easing their weight back and forth on old wood. It took me a second to place it because I'd heard it for years outside, the porch swing at the antique store, but never inside my walls. I sat up. The living room was dark except for a rectangle of streetlight crawling across the rug. The creak came again. Maya's door stayed closed. The bathroom nightlight made its little pearl of light. The AC clicked on and off and did nothing about the heat. I stood up too fast and the blood went out of my head. I leaned on the back of the couch and waited it out. The creak went quiet like it knew I was listening. I stood still until my calves sang. Finally, I walked down the hall. The sound started again. Not the bathroom. Not the kitchen, my room. I pushed the door open with my foot like I was braced for someone to grab it and pull back. The creak was inside. It was near the window. I don't own a rocking chair. I don't own anything that rocks. The window was shut. The blind slats made a herringbone pattern on the wall. The creak kept going, slow, like someone careful not to wake a baby. I backhanded the light switch. The sound stopped clean. My bed, my dresser, my embarrassment, nothing else. I stood with the light on until the bulb added its own gasp to the heat and turned it off again. Back in the living room, I lay on the couch and left my eyes open to the dark until I had to close them. In the morning, the ribbon was tied around the inside doorknob to my bedroom. Same bow, same odd loops. When I tried to untie it, the knot caught and held for a second like it had been pulled by small hands that knew how to make a thing stay. I ended up cutting it with kitchen scissors because the sudden need to have it off outweighed everything else. I threw it away and took the trash out right then, barefoot, down the hot metal stairs. That afternoon, I sat on the steps to cool and saw Hector across the street at the gate, locking it in a way that said he didn't care if the sign said open hours. He's older. Gray hair tight to his head, always in a light button-down like he's on his way to church. I crossed to him because I wanted to be rational with someone whose job was tending a place that made me irrational. He nodded at me in a way that said he recognized my face, if not my name. "You're the kid from the other night," he said. I laughed because I'm older than kid and because I didn't know what else to do. "Yeah," I said. "We all went in late. Sorry if that's a problem." He waved a hand at sorry like it was a gnat. He looked tired. "You left tape," he said. I started to say we brought it in, but he went on. "They know it now. The color." He watched the lock settle into place. I pick it up when I see it so it doesn't catch their eye. I'm not proud of my next question.
"Kids?" I asked. Like if he said no, I could put the ribbon in the trash again in my mind.
He squinted at nothing. "It's not my place to say what they are," he said finally. "I clean, I fix. I tell people to be decent with the dead. That's my job." He paused. "You should ask whatever you brought to go back where it came from." He said it like he was giving directions to a restaurant. I didn't know how to do that. I said so. He gave me the smallest smile like I was missing a joke that wasn't funny. "You'll think this is strange," he said. "It is strange. Put a bowl of water by the door. Leave a light on. Before you sleep, say out loud that whatever is small and lost needs to go home. Then you leave something they like where they'll find it. and you don't take it back. He touched the gate. You only have so much you can afford to give. He looked past me and I realized he wasn't warning me for effect. He was telling me what he did every night before he turned the key. I thanked him because anything else felt like I'd break open in front of a stranger. At home, I did what he said because not doing it felt worse. I set a bowl of water by the door. I left the hall light on. I said out loud, "If you're small and lost, go home." It sounded foolish and hopeful and like a prayer I'd accidentally known the words to all along. I put the ribbon, not the cut one, a new one, white from Maya's sewing tin, on the sill. I stayed awake on the couch and watched the hallway wall draw and erase its little triangle of light, while the city did nighttime city things around us. Nothing happened. Sometimes nothing is a luxury. Other times it's just a pause where the next thing gathers its breath. 2 nights later, Maya had her critique. She printed a set of the cemetery photos minus the handprints. She didn't want to make a thing out of it in front of other people. I understood. I gave her space to get ready and tried not to look at the bowl of water by the door and what looked like 2 smudges near its edge, as if someone had braced tiny hands there to peer in. She left early. I watched a movie without seeing any of it and turned it off when the soundtrack made me think of dripping. At 10, the power went out on our block. It wasn't a whole city thing. The other side of 11th was lit. Ours was a black triangle cut out of the map. My phone buzzed with the city utility alert. Outage. Crews dispatched. I lit 2 candles like someone about to sing Happy Birthday with no cake. The apartment hummed with its own silence. There's a point where dark stops being an absence and starts being a presence. That's where I was when the creak started again. I went cold first, then careful. The creak didn't come from my room this time. It came from the hallway. Slow forward, slow back, wood strained, wood relieved. I stood and the wax of the candle slid toward my knuckles and threatened to drip on my hand. I didn't move my grip. I walked to the hallway and saw nothing, which meant nothing. The bathroom light, dead from the outage, offered no safety. The creak continued, steady, soothing if I weren't the one listening. "Hey," I heard myself say, soft in the sort of voice you use when you don't want to startle a deer. "It's time to go home." It kept going. A pause between each movement, like a breath held and let go. My own breath got louder in my ears. I set the candle on the hallway floor and felt my legs lock above the knees. The bowl of water by the door mirrored the flame. Something ticked beside it, a tiny sound like a ring put down gently. I crouched because standing felt arrogant. The creak stilled as if waiting, and I said, "Please, if this is where you're expecting a shadow to leap or a voice to enter from the left, I'm sorry." It wasn't like that. The creak stopped in the middle of a motion that would have carried on if no one watched. The hallway felt lighter, like a window opened somewhere far away. The candle flared and then narrowed to a thread. The bowl of water rippled once, then settled. Across the top of the water, near the rim, were 2 long, pale lines. Parallel, like tape ends laid side by side. When I tipped the bowl to check, they were gone. Not dissolved. Gone like the chalk sun. Maya came home in the middle of the outage. We sat on the floor by the door and pretended we were camping. She put her head on my shoulder the way she hadn't since we were kids. The power thumped back around midnight and we both jumped and laughed like people who had gotten away with something. I'd love to tell you that was the end. That the next morning we woke to nothing strange. And the day after that felt like a regular weekday. And time put dirt back over what we stirred. For a while it looked like that's what we were getting. No handprints on the glass. No ribbon bows. No creak. Maya slept. I slept, mostly. Then last week Tyler texted at 3 in the morning. Which he doesn't do unless it's a group chat and he's sending a blurry picture of the bar's attempt at nachos. "You up?" He wrote, "I was." I said yes. He sent a photo without comment. It was the gate at Oakwood. Someone had tied a ribbon to it, white with a clumsy bow. Under the bow was a little safety pin, open. The ribbon's ends hung parallel. The picture was grainy in the way a phone camera makes everything at night look like it's breathing. Behind the gate, down near the ground, 2 little shapes appeared where the dew had started to settle. Tyler sent one more text. "Hector asked if you returned what you borrowed." I started typing something dumb like, "We didn't borrow anything," and stopped because I didn't want to lie to a friend, and also because I didn't know where that line is anymore. Maybe we're all borrowing when we walk where we shouldn't. Maybe you can't go into a place that holds that much listening and not leave with some of it in your pockets. Yesterday I found chalk on my front step. Not a drawing. A stub, pale and used down to an awkward angle that fits best in the grip of a small hand. There was a little smear of something on it the color of old water. I don't own chalk. The kids 2 doors down do, but theirs is bright and new, and they keep it in a plastic bin. I called Maya over and we stood there with the door open like idiots, looking at the chalk piece like it was going to explain itself. I put it on the sill next to the empty bowl. We don't keep water there anymore. I don't know if that's a mistake. I keep thinking about the handprints in the dew and the parallel lens and the way the tape knot was left tied, like someone was telling us there are rules we don't understand, but will be held to anyway. I think about the caretaker who cleans and fixes and leaves a light on. I think about the porch swing that never needs a person. I think about the sound of a rocking chair in a room that doesn't have one, and the way certain sounds move into you and start living there. Last night I woke to quiet and lay very still so I wouldn't break it. The AC clicked and clicked again. A car rolled by too fast and blew a corner of my curtain outward and back. Somewhere blocks away someone laughed, and it carried just enough that you could invent what the joke had been. I thought of what to type and how to make this sound like something a normal person would say. Without the part where I tell you, I have the feeling that when I go to the kitchen and turn on the sink, the drip might take on a rhythm again. I keep hearing the cadence in my head. Plink, plink. As if something small and patient is still counting, still marking the time it's been away, still waiting for us to look away so it can finish its motion. Maybe this is me trying to put it back by putting it into words. Maybe you're reading it and nodding because you've been places that hold on to you the way a small hand will hold a finger. Tight enough you feel the pulse and can't pretend it's not there. Soft enough you don't pull away in case pulling away is the thing that makes it cry. I don't know if I believe in hauntings in the way people want me to. I believe in weather. I believe in time pooling in low spots. I believe in the ordinary acts people do for love and how they keep doing them long after. It's past midnight now. The bowl is empty. The ribbon is gone. Another band of heat lightning walked over the city and moved on. I'm going to sleep with the hallway light on and the front door chain caught, and the couch where I can see the door. I can hear my sister breathe lightly down the hall. I can hear my neighbor's TV through the vent, the sound tinny and safe. And under that, if I hold my breath and tilt my head just so, I think I can make out something like a chair easing forward and back, in a room that is not mine and is somehow inside my chest. If you know the sound, you know it. If you don't, I hope you never do. Either way, if you ever find yourself at the Oakwood gate at night and the city feels far away in a way it shouldn't, do me a favor, leave a little water by the threshold, tie your ribbon badly, and say out loud, even if you don't believe it, that whatever is small and lost can go home. And when you walk away, try not to listen for the drip behind you. Try not to count. I never thought I'd share this, but I need to get it off my chest before it eats whatever sleep I have left. My name doesn't matter. I live up in Fort Worth and do a bit of everything to keep the lights on. Part-time rideshare, part-time delivery, and a lot of odd handyman jobs. If you've driven late at night, you know how it gets inside your head. The hum of tires becomes a kind of hypnosis. Your world collapses to white lines in the space framed by your windshield. The rearview mirror floats like a black square in the middle of it all, and you check it over and over without thinking. That habit is important to this story. That and my old Honda with the squeaky right door seal. If you hear a faint whistle, that's me on the highway somewhere, glancing up at that mirror out of reflex. What happened started with my friend Clay and my younger sister Lena. They'd never met until that weekend, which somehow made them instant allies. The way some people click in a small town where everyone else already has a history. We went down to Granbury because Lena had a line on a cheap dresser she found on Marketplace, and Clay wanted to shoot some B-roll for his tiny horror channel on YouTube. Clay's 6'4" and all elbows, the kind of guy who laughs inside his throat, and he has this way of making the normal feel dramatic. Lena is the opposite, patient, practical, always with a backup plan. She's the one who carries extra phone chargers and laminate sheets for meal prep. We picked up the dresser from a woman off Old Granbury Road who seemed desperate to get rid of anything that reminded her of a divorce. On the way back, we grabbed dinner at a diner off the square, one of those places with plastic-covered menus and fans that turn just a touch too slow. The waitress was a woman with careful lipstick and a name tag that said D. We were joking about Clay's horror channel when Dee leaned in and said, "If you want a story, You take that camera out to the cemetery after dark and drive the loop road. Stay near the old section where the grass won't take. If you see a tall lady in a red dress, keep moving." Clay perked up like a dog that heard the crinkle of a treat bag. "What's the story?" he asked, already pulling out a notebook he never wrote in. Dee's eyes flicked to the window, even though the glass was just reflecting our booth and the dessert case. "Granbury's proud of Jesse James and all that," she said. "Folks come for the outlaw and leave talking about her. The lady in red stands near the edge of the road like she's waiting on a ride. If you stop, there's nothing there. If you don't, some say she gets in anyway." "Gets in how?" I asked. It felt like asking out of politeness, the way you ask how a card trick works knowing you won't get a real answer. Dee tapped my rearview mirror with her knuckle like it was hanging over the table. "Back seat," she said. "Shows up in that glass and not anywhere else." Lena coughed into her napkin and then gave me a look that said don't. I knew it because I had the same look living on the inside of my face. But Clay said what he always says when we're hovering around a bad idea. "One slow lap," he promised. "We'll be back in time for pie." The evening had that almost fall feeling Texas gets in late September when the heat stops pressing right before sundown. You think you smell cold. It tricks you into rolling the window down even though it still sneaks sweat down your spine. We turned off the square with its neat historic storefronts and followed the way Dee described, past quiet houses with soft porch lights and the kind of yard signs that say "Please be kind" in rainbow colors, or "Jesus saves" in white on blue. Granbury Cemetery rose out of pecan trees and a low stone wall, the white gate gleaming in our headlights. There was a visible older section, smaller markers, rougher stones, and a patch the size of a small yard where the ground looked chewed. Dee was right. The grass there came up in the green equivalent of stubble. It wasn't dirt exactly, more like a pale scalp where nothing wanted to take root. We stopped just inside the gate beside a posted sign about visiting hours. Clay filmed the sign, then the road, then my hands on the wheel. He asked me to narrate like I was a park ranger. Lena shifted in the back seat with the big dresser leaning against the far door and said, "Let's keep the windows up." I made fun of her for that, gentle, but I did it anyway because somehow rolling the glass up felt like a small promise we were making to ourselves. The cemetery was quiet in the particular way quiet gets at the edge of town. I could hear our tires whispering over packed gravel. I could hear the click of Clay's camera button, and the whisper of the air vent and the soft catch of my own breath every time the headlights flashed over a name. There's a way to drive slowly without looking like you're doing it. My right foot found that speed. Every so often, Clay would say, "Hold," and I'd let the car coast while he filmed some angel statue or a family plot where all the dates were clustered and cruel. We came around the first bend and the older section opened on our right. That's where I felt the first nudge of something I couldn't explain. It wasn't a sound, not at first. It was the space above my shoulders noticing its own shape. Like when someone stands behind you in line and you know it before you hear a footfall because your skin gets aware. I touched the rear view, just a habit, but I felt my knuckles go cold from the inside. There was nothing in it except the smudge of my back window and the dresser. The dresser's brass-handled drawers were facing forward, absurdly polite, like it was riding shotgun in reverse. "We're passing the patch," Clay said, not looking up from the viewfinder. "Get that in frame." Lena cleared her throat. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I told her it was probably dusty fabric. Old furniture smells like a thrift store no matter how long you air it out. But it wasn't that. It wasn't mildew or polish. It was something faint and sharp, like the idea of cold on skin or the first breath when you open a freezer. It had a whisper of perfume to it. Not modern. Powdery. Like something in your grandmother's medicine cabinet that's been closed for years. He was filming through the open space between the front seats, holding the camera low to catch the top of the road. "Did she say which side?" he asked. "Where she stands." Lena said, "She stands anywhere she wants," and tried to laugh, but the laugh had too many corners. She was looking at her knees the way people do when they don't want to look at anything else. She had tucked her hand under her legs and run her thumb over the seam of her jeans, a small habit left over from childhood when she wouldn't step on sidewalk cracks. We came to a place where the road pinched a little and the stones felt close on both sides. That's when I saw her, although even now I hate to write it that way because it sounds like a leap. My headlights touched the shoulder of a figure on the edge of the loop road, exactly where Dee said. Tall. Elegant. The red wasn't screaming or bright. It was a dark red like something you'd see in a faded wedding photo. A red that the night almost ate. The dress hit the ground in clean lines and had that quiet drama old pictures have. I couldn't make out her face because it wasn't where my eyes wanted to go. All I truly saw was the bend of her neck and the sense of shape, and for 1 second the windshield made her a painting. Clay's camera bumped the dash. "There," he said, soft and excited like he didn't want to scare a bird. I had already slowed to the speed of a decision. Stopping would have meant putting her in the flood of our headlights, and I couldn't make my hands do it. The steering wheel felt slick even though I knew it wasn't. I let the car glide. We slid past her so close I could have reached out and adjusted the imaginary sleeve of her dress. I kept my eyes on the road and my mind did the thing minds do when they're scared. It made a list of ordinary things nearby. The white pebble in the gravel shoulder, the slight dip where water had pooled and left a pale ring, the tiny moth body on the inside of the windshield where it had died against the glass yesterday afternoon. My eyes flicked up to the rear view, not to look at her, but to verify the distance between the dresser and the back window. The mirror gave me my own face, the square black frame of night beyond it, and then a shape resolved in the middle of it the way a reflection appears when you fog glass. It was the red I had just passed made smaller by perspective and the rules of mirrors. No face, no moving fabric, just a certainty of presence. Centered exactly where a passenger would sit if they had ridden since the gate. The steady part of my brain tried to tell me it was a trick of the red taillights bouncing off a stone. But my car was moving and the stone was behind us and the shape didn't change. "Don't stop," Lena said, and her voice didn't sound like hers exactly. It was careful and pressed thin between her teeth so it wouldn't break. "Just keep the wheel straight." I kept the wheel straight. There was a little rattle in the center console because a quarter had gotten wedged there, and I heard it counting the distance. Clay leaned back like he could keep from crowding the air. He didn't turn around even though every centimeter of him wanted to. He kept the camera pointed forward like he could film ourselves out of it. "How many seconds?" I asked. It was a stupid question, but my mouth was full of them. "How many seconds of this before the loop ends?" 2 minutes, Clay said. "Maybe 3 if you don't hit the brake." The perfume smell was stronger, still cold, still like the ghost of something expensive a long time ago. The back of my neck prickled along the hairline, and I felt the pressure of the rear passenger door as if someone threaded a ribbon through the handle and pulled once. Not a tug, just a reminder. I told myself it was the dresser settling, but the dresser had settled a dozen times that evening and it never pulled the air thin like that. The road widened again near the gate, and there was a proper shoulder where a cart path used to be. I didn't remember much detail from the houses and trees outside anymore. Everything my eyes touched inside the car went bright, like the interior had stolen all the voltage. The mirror felt too close. I could see a fractional rise in the middle of the back seat cushion. Nothing dramatic, like the seat remembered weight. It looked like what's left after someone gets out. I didn't stop at the gate. I didn't look left or right for cars. I rolled onto the street and kept going until the cemetery washed out behind us in a smear of gray trunks and dark space. Only then did my foot find the brake. The car came to a stop in front of a single-story house with a metal star by the door and a yard cut in perfect stripes. No one was out. The hum of our engine felt loud, sudden, like waking from a nap where you'd forgotten you were sleeping. We sat. None of us said anything right away. The smell faded as fast as a perfume sample in a magazine page you close. I turned over my shoulder. The back seat was what it always was. A seatbelt buckle, a blanket Lena keeps for grocery runs, the smooth front of the dresser pressed to the door. The mirror showed only me. Clay let out a breath like he'd been holding it for the last mile. His hands shook when he set the camera in his lap. "We have it," he said. "We have something. Did you see that?" Lena had her eyes shut. She opened them and they were glassy with the kind of tears that don't go anywhere. "We're not going to post it," she said. "We'll check it and then we'll delete it." Clay looked wounded. "We can cut it so—" "No," she said. "No, I'm serious. We're going to put it in the trunk and let the cameras sleep. Please, Clay, do that for me." He did. He got out and put the camera in the trunk. The night air curled into the car through the open door. I felt the difference immediately, the way the outside pressed in and then chose not to. Clay came back in with a rush and slammed the door, and the right door seal gave that tiny whistle it always gives, and for a second it sounded like someone shushing us. We drove back to the diner because that was safe by definition. Lights, other people, pie that tasted the way pie was supposed to taste. Dee saw us come in and put down 3 menus on the counter even though we sat at a booth. "You boys see anything?" she asked. She included Lena in boys the way older people include everyone when it's not about gender, but about being whoever is younger by a decade. Clay opened his mouth. Lena touched his wrist. "We just drove," I said. "Nothing much to report." Dee watched us for a second like a teacher who already knows who stole the chalk. Then she poured coffee and said, "Sometimes not much is the whole of it." We stayed longer than the pie required. When we did leave, I checked the back seat twice like a person leaving a rental in a hurry. It was habit now, but also not. It was a ritual. There's a difference. Rituals expect someone else to participate. Lena stayed the night at a friend's in town. Clay and I headed back toward Fort Worth. He fell asleep almost immediately. Long legs jammed against the glove box, his head tilted at an angle that would break a cardboard cutout. Traffic thinned to almost nothing once we left the lit parts of the county. The road unwound in front of me. I didn't play music. I just drove and checked the mirror every 10 seconds and told myself that was normal. The dresser shifted once on the way home and it didn't feel like a message. I want to say that's the whole story and it would be strange enough. Folks see things at night. They tell themselves a legend and then their eyes fill in the missing parts. That's a tidy explanation and I tried to keep it. The second part began 2 days later and didn't ask what I believed. It just rehearsed itself until I couldn't pretend it was a one-time thing. The ride request came through, a little after midnight from a bar on Camp Bowie. The rider's name in the app was Jen. I pulled up and she was waiting outside with a friend. She got in the back and said thank you in the way people say thank you when they've practiced for safety. I started the trip. We drove 2 blocks. The mirror caught a flicker of color that didn't match the back seat. The overhead light of a passing car made it clearer. A red that looked darker than it should. Not bright, not screaming. I blinked and it was gone. Jen said, "Do you smell something?" I said maybe it was the air freshener clip. She said no. It was like her grandmother's closet in the wintertime. She sounded embarrassed for even noticing. I dropped her off. I checked the back seat because that's company policy and also because I had to. The seat was clear. I got 2 more rides. The second man asked me to turn the AC down because he said the drafts were getting to him. He rubbed his arms and said he had the weirdest chill along the back of his neck. The third rider was an older guy who sat up front and told me about his dog. Nothing happened then. The mirror was just a mirror. I went home and slept badly without knowing why. It escalated in small ways. The next night, a woman canceled when I pulled up because she said there was someone already in the back, and then apologized through the cracked window when she saw no one there. Another rider asked who else I'd dropped off because the seat felt warm. Then a man got in and asked, "Is your partner riding with you?" He pointed to the mirror. I said no. He laughed and said, "Oh, never mind," and then didn't talk for the rest of the ride. I told myself I was getting suggestible, and my riders were drunk and the mirror was catching the bleed of taillights. Lena came over to grab the dresser because she was moving into a new place. She walked to the car with me and we wrestled it out together in sliding steps that felt like a dance. When we pulled it free, there was a shape in the dust on the seat that made both of us stop. It wasn't a perfect stain. It wasn't anything you could photograph for court. It was the suggestion of a long skirt dragged through silt, a clean arc where the dust was thinner, a crescent at calf height if you were tracing air. When I palmed the seat, my hand came up cold as if I'd touched metal that had been shaded all day. "Please get rid of the car," Lena said. She said it like she knew I couldn't. The insurance payments were too much and the work depended on it. But she said it anyway. She held the edge of the dresser and looked at me hard. "Or take it to a car wash. Get the inside steamed. I don't care if you think it's silly. Do it." I did. I took it to a car wash out on Jacksboro Highway, where the vacuum hoses surge and gasp like they're alive. The kid who handed me the air freshener was cheerful in the way of people whose shift is almost over. They ran it through with the big cloth flaps, they wiped it by hand, they sprayed something lemony and artificial. I sat in the plastic chair by the gumball machine and watched. The whole time, the mirror looked down on me like a hood ornament that had swallowed a moon. I told myself I was being dramatic and I should go home and sleep. That night, Deputy Ruiz called me. He had my number from the ride-along program because I drove a lot of weekends and picked people up near patrol areas. He's one of those calm men whose voice lowers chaos just by existing in it.
"Hey," he said.
"You post any footage from that cemetery thing? A guy at the diner said you were filming." I told him we didn't post it. I said we probably never would. He made a sound like he approved. I'm not telling you what to do, he said. Just heads up, they don't like people out there after hours. And if you think you saw something, well, that place has enough stories. Let them stay stories. We got real people to worry about. Did you ever see her? I asked before I could stop myself. I don't know why. Asking a cop that felt like asking a surgeon if they believed in prayer in the middle of an operation. He paused. The line clicked with road noise. I see a lot of people who want someone to ride with them, he said. Not all of them are living. I didn't sleep. I kept the ceiling fan on medium and I got up twice to check the front door, even though I knew I'd locked it. Around 3, I realized something very specific was keeping me awake. The thought that if I went downstairs to the car and turned on the dome light, I would find the rear floor mat wet, like someone had come in from dew without making a sound. The next evening, my sister texted me. It was a picture of the dresser in her apartment, the sun striping it in boards through the blinds. She had put a vase on it, and in the vase there were grocery store roses the color of brick. Under the picture she wrote, "The red makes it look old in a good way." For some reason that made my chest tighten. I didn't reply for an hour, and when I did, I just sent a thumbs up. I don't know why I didn't tell her not to keep red flowers on it. That would have been like confirming a superstition. I'm the older brother. I have to be the one who refuses to see the pattern. That's how we pretend we're safe. Clay called me 2 days later. He sounded tired. He said he had rewatched the cemetery footage because he couldn't help it. He promised he didn't upload it. He said it didn't show anything. Just empty road, empty seat, my face stretched in the mirror like a man trying not to blink. But there was a frame in the middle where the camera had jerked as he adjusted it, and for a single fraction something red streaked through the back window, the way car light does when you turn your head. He slowed it. He went frame by frame. On the streak there were little vertical lines like pleats. You should delete that, I said, my throat dry. You should delete it while you're still telling yourself it shows nothing. He didn't argue. He just exhaled through his nose. I keep hearing a dress when I'm alone, he said after a second. In my apartment. There's nothing there, but I hear fabric moving like it's catching on something. My chair, the corner of the table. I think maybe I'm thinking about it too much. We didn't go back to Granbury. We didn't have to. The lady, if you want to call whatever this is lady, is patient. She does not need you to visit. She's like a song that shows up on random no matter what playlist you made. She started coming on rides where nobody asked about her. A woman with a grocery bag asked me to turn off the radio because she wanted to hear the pages of a letter in the envelope she was holding. She said the paper had a sound like silk thinking about it. A man said he used to sell perfume at Dillard's and asked if I liked vintage scents. I told him I didn't know one from another. He listed names I didn't recognize and then said, "Sometimes something old finds a new wearer." I began keeping a small flashlight in my pocket even on runs to the gas station. I started checking the back seat in the glare of the pump lights while the pump clicked, checking between the front seats like I'd dropped something. Sometimes I'd sit there with the engine off and listen to the car cool. That soft ticking is the most lonely sound in the world if you lean into it. Twice I started to reach over the seat to feel for warmth and drew my hand back the way you draw your hand back from a dog you don't know. A week passed. It got simpler to accept it than to resist. The mirror was a tool I used, not an eye that watched me. Work was work. I picked up people. I dropped off people. I didn't talk about it with them any more than you talk about the weather when it's unremarkably bad. You note it and you move on. Then came the ride I think about when the house creaks at 3 in the morning and I'm wide awake pretending to be asleep. It was a pickup on a quiet street off White Settlement. The rider's name in the app was just B. I pulled up and a young guy got in, maybe 22, tense in the way of someone who has just had an argument. He told me to take him to his mother's place. He said it was nothing, then started crying without warning, like a faucet that forgot not to turn. I drove and said the things you say to a stranger who accidentally handed you a piece of himself. In the middle of his crying, he went silent and stared at the mirror. Not exactly at it, at the space near it. "Do you do that on purpose?" He asked. "Do I do what?" "The back seat," he said. "That trick. The shadow that looks like a person. It's good. It makes it feel like someone's there." It made me stop crying. I looked up fast enough to scare myself. The mirror was a mirror. Dark, slightly dusty at the edges. He kept watching it the way you watch a night sky to find a satellite. Feels like when someone waits with you at a bus stop, he said, settling back into the seat. You know, not talking, just making the space feel not empty. When I dropped him off, he squeezed my shoulder with the grateful intimacy people save for drivers and nurses. My skin crawled where his fingers touched. I don't know why that part sticks with me. Maybe because he thanked me for something I didn't do. I could end here and say it hasn't changed since. That would be half true. I live now with a new set of habits. I don't park under trees that move a lot in the wind because the patterns on the rear window turn my stomach. I don't give rides after 2 if I can help it. I keep a handkerchief in my pocket because the seat sometimes feels damp first thing in the morning, in a way I can't blame on condensation. I found short red threads stuck in the seat seam twice. They were so fine I thought they were from a blanket. I don't own a blanket that color. I told myself my riders do. Clay sends me texts at odd hours. Mostly jokes. Sometimes it's just the word awake. He's filming other things now. No cemeteries. He told me he moved his couch so it doesn't face the hallway because that makes him feel watched less. Lena says the dresser looks more at home every day. She puts her mail on it. She keeps keys in the top drawer. Once she sent a video of her cat sleeping under it, reaching a paw into some empty space only cats can see. The brick-colored roses lasted longer than they should have. She mentioned it casually and then changed the subject. Every so often I think about the grass at Granbury, that pale patch where nothing wants to grow. I think about the way it looked under the headlights, like a place the ground refused to put on a face for. I've looked up pictures of cemeteries since then. They all have their bare places. Water tables, soil composition, shade that never moves. There's always a reason if you want one. 2 weeks ago, Deputy Ruiz called again. His voice was low in a different way. He said they'd had a break-in. Nothing stolen. The door left open. The homeowner found a streak on her hallway floor like someone walked through talc with a long skirt. He wanted to know if I'd picked up anyone near there. I checked the app logs while I leaned against my car. The sun was high and the hood was hot. I could hear the tick-tick-tick of expansion. I told him the truth. No rides on that block. I almost told him about the thread and the drafts and the shape in the dust. I didn't because I didn't want to be the person who gave a story a badge. Last night I woke up because the AC kicked on and something about the sound wasn't right. It wasn't the rush from the vent. It was a soft friction a half-beat later, like fabric deciding how to settle. I listened. My apartment is small. The sound seemed to come from nowhere particular, which is another way of saying everywhere. I lay there and thought about milk in the fridge and what I needed at the store, and how good the first sip of coffee would be. All the little decoys we throw at our heads so they won't look at the thing walking in through the obvious door. It was almost morning when I fell asleep again. I dreamed I was waiting in a car outside a gate. The gate was the one in Granbury, but in the dream it was made of something softer, like paper that had learned to be metal. The sky was gray. I put my hand on the passenger seat because I had just dropped someone off. The seat was warm. Not hot, not body warm. The warmth that lingers from a heated blanket you forgot to turn off. In the mirror, the back seat looked the way it does now when I don't try to make it be something else. Not empty. Not empty. Expectant. I woke up to light on the wall and the noise of my upstairs neighbor moving a chair. When I went down to the car later, there was a mark on the rear door glass, a smudge shaped like the side of a palm with a streak running down, the kind you get when you drag a hand toward a handle and change your mind. I wiped it off. The glass squeaked. I know how this reads. It reads like a man who scared himself once and then built a life around that scare. Maybe that's exactly what it is, and I need better hobbies and darker curtains. Maybe the mirror is always honest and we are the ones who keep telling it to lie. All I can do is tell you what happened in order in the simplest language I have. If you go to Granbury and you drive the loop at night, you might see a tall woman just beyond the reach of your headlights. She might be the color of an old red dress that photographs wrong. She might stand like she's late for a ride in a town where no one is ever in a hurry. If you stop, the story says she will be gone. If you don't, the story says she will be there anyway. And the proof will be a cold breath at the nape of your neck and a shape that only exists in glass. Each night I tell myself I'll get used to it. I'll start driving days. I'll sell the car and buy one with a mirror that feels less like an eye. But the Honda starts and the app pings and the world needs rides. The first check of the mirror is habit. The second is a ritual. The third is hope she won't be there tonight. The fourth is hope she will be, because if she's riding with me, she isn't walking alone along that road where the grass won't take, waiting for a car that hasn't learned her rules yet. I keep going. I hum with the tires. I count the seconds between streetlights. I let the draft in through the bad door seal and pretend it's only air. Sometimes at a red light I feel the back seat pressed different by the smallest degree, the way a cushion remembers. Sometimes my phone catches a reflection that isn't mine, and then explains it away with a notification. Sometimes a rider will sit down behind me and say thank you, and I'll say you're welcome, and we'll both mean it in a way that has nothing to do with the ride. I don't have a moral for you. I don't have a solution. I have a mirror that shows what's there and a town that swears by what isn't. If you ever find yourself on that loop road and you see a red shape waiting politely at the edge, do what you want. People always do. Just don't be surprised if the seat beside you remembers her weight even after you swear you dropped her off. I never planned on writing this down, but every time I try to sleep, I get that same thin taste of smoke in the back of my throat, like I've been breathing beside a campfire that isn't there, and I think maybe if I put the whole thing somewhere public, it'll stop living just in my head. I live in El Paso. Born here, raised here, still not brave enough to drive scenic drive at night without checking the rearview mirror too much. The desert is a weird kind of quiet when the wind pauses and the streetlights float like islands. Maybe that's why people here talk about ghosts the way other towns talk about weather. It isn't dramatic, just normal, like, oh, wind's picking up. Oh, lights flickered. Oh, someone saw a lady in white by the river again. If you don't know Concordia Cemetery, locals call it Boot Hill. Oldest graves you'll ever see outside of a textbook. Wooden markers slanted like tired shoulders. Iron fencing that leans or bites your jeans if you get careless. Angels with faces worn smooth by sun and dust. A lot of history, exactly the kind that gets you a tourist brochure and a bad idea at 11 p.m. The brochure's for the day, the bad ideas for after. I had both. The trouble started with my sister Anna. She's 3 years younger and has that twitchy curiosity I never outgrew either. She works at a coffee shop by UTEP and knows every weirdo who orders decaf with a double shot. One of those weirdos is Rena, a grad student who runs with a paranormal group. Runs with meaning she owns a case of radios, a thermal camera, and the kind of confidence that makes you feel silly for doubting. Rena has this way of speaking where she laughs at the end of sentences that aren't jokes, like she knows something on the other side of them. She told Anna about an event on the edge of the cemetery, a midnight walk, small, respectful, inside the rules. We don't provoke, Rena said, we just listen. The listening part was the hook for Anna. It was my hook too. We both grew up in a house where whispering under the swamp cooler could get you in trouble, because Mom would hear everything. So listening in the open felt rebellious. We agreed to meet Rena at the gate off Yandell, not far from where the freeway hum rolls like a dry river. On the way, Anna kept checking her phone. The forecast said a calm night. High of 81 falling into the low 60s, but the desert plays jokes with heat. It keeps it in the rocks like a secret and lets it go after midnight. We parked under a tired streetlight that simmered a sickly orange and stepped into the kind of quiet that only happens when your shoes stop moving. The city's noise fell away as soon as we walked past the black iron sign that says Concordia Cemetery. It felt like stepping into a bigger ear, like the night itself leaned in. Rena was waiting with 2 other people from her group. A guy named Daniel who used to do sound for a local band and a woman named Celeste, whose steady voice made you want to confess things. They had backpacks and headlamps and a printed permission form. Even reading the words, "Permission to access for educational purposes" at the gate made me feel like I wasn't doing anything wrong. Which is exactly what you want to feel when you've convinced yourself you aren't scared. "Hey," Rena said, putting her flashlight beam low, respectful. "Just remember, don't step on graves, don't touch the fences if you can help it, iron's old and mean. If you hear someone speaking, answer the way you would a neighbor. Keep it normal. Normal in a place like that is a percentage. You do the math with your heartbeat." The first thing I noticed walking in was the smell. Not smoke, not then. It was creosote and penny-colored dirt. A sweetness from the desert broom and something metallic that lived in the iron fence. The second thing was how the sky looked so much bigger from inside the cemetery than it had from the street. Like all the noise had been scraped off of it. We walked past the headstones with names that could be lifted out of a ballad. Chavez, O'Reilly Botello Chen. Rena moved like she knew the place intimately, pausing at certain markers to tilt her headlamp and say a surname under her breath like a greeting. She showed us the area with buffalo soldiers, the Chinese section with fragments of blue and white plates left for the dead, the gunfighter's grave with the matchbox cars and cigarette butts visitors still leave. Like they can bribe a story out of a man who's more legend than fact. Everything felt layered, history stacked like blankets. The wind nudged our jackets in small polite taps and the freeway hummed like a neighbor's AC. Children's section is over this way, Rena said, and that was the first time my mouth dried. I didn't know why yet. Maybe because I'm a teacher, middle school, and I know the shape of a kid's laugh, and I also know how easy it is to miss when a kid is not okay. The headstones got smaller, the toys on them newer, stuffed bears bleached to the memory of color, plastic cars blunted by sun. There was a place where the dirt sank a little, a soft parade of footprints. You could tell it was where people stopped to pray or talk or leave things. Someone had left a fire truck that looked almost brand new, red glowing even in the dim. It was there we met the groundskeeper, Mr. Rubio. He was in his 70s, plain ball cap, flashlight that had been dropped too many times. He showed up quietly like a habit. "Evening," he said. "You all got permission?" Rena showed him the paper and he nodded, the kind of nod that says I'd let you stay anyway as long as you're respectful. "You're with the lady who donates the bottled water in summers, right?" he asked Rena. "I remember you." He looked at me and Anna. "You two step careful. Dirt caves a little in this section." "Is it true about the boy?" Anna asked. "The one who?" "In the fire?" Rubio's flashlight moved, not to a grave but to a patch of dirt that had the stubborn shape of a place people stand more than anything else. "Stories help people. Stories hurt people, both at once sometimes," he said. "If you smell something, don't go chasing it." He looked at me a little too long, like he'd heard my heartbeat doing long division. "You smell anything, you stand still and you call out like you would to a kid hiding in a closet. You ask if they want you to leave. Then you listen." He left us with that and the click of his old flashlight opening and closing like a polite throat clearing. Rena watched him go, then turned her beam toward a low iron-bordered plot. "We don't use names for the kids," she said softly. "We don't ask questions with dates in them. We just let the night speak. Letting the night speak sounds like a Hallmark card until the night actually does." We set the little recorder on a flat stone. Daniel checked levels and made a face that said the noise floor was clean. No power lines buzzing weird, no wind whipping the mic. Celeste took out a cheap digital thermometer and clicked it a few times. 68 degrees, 67, 68. Normal enough to be forgettable. Rena had a small radio that scans frequencies. Sometimes you'll hear a single clear word, but most of the time it's just static and random syllables, and enough room to project your own hopes or fears into what you think you heard. She turned it on for formality and then, to her credit, turned it down. "Okay," she said softly, almost to the dirt. "We're visiting. We'll be gentle. If anyone wants to be heard, we'll listen. I swear to you, and you can say I was primed or suggestible or whatever, but the air felt heavier in the next minute. Not colder, just more present, like the space between the stones filled in. I focused on my breathing so I didn't start doing that panicky, shallow thing. Anna, who is usually brave to the point of stupidity, clutched my jacket sleeve once and then let go like she didn't want to embarrass herself. The freeway hummed. Somewhere nearby, a train made that first tentative horn like it was clearing its throat politely a mile away. A dog barked twice from a neighborhood yard and then decided it didn't care. That's when the smell burnt the edge of the air. I say burnt because it wasn't like someone grilling or a fireplace. It was the thin, acrid thread of something too close to skin. Old wood or fabric scorched, that faint, fat, sweet edge that makes your mouth water for the wrong reasons. It was soft at first, like maybe it blew in from far away. Then it wasn't. It came in quick, like someone had cracked a door. It went right to the back of my throat and stuck there. I saw Daniel swallow. I heard Celeste say quietly, "I smell it." Rena, to her credit, kept her voice exactly the way she said it would be with a neighbor. "If that's you," she said, not looking at any one stone, we smell it. We won't come closer. "Do you want us to leave?" The radio coughed static. Not words. Something that felt like an exhale. And the smell got stronger, as if the answer had been no or yes or both. My instinct was to step back, and that's when my heel hit something hard. I didn't fall, just wobbled, looked down, and saw the iron border Rena had warned us about. It scraped across my shoe like a fingernail. I felt stupid and very visible. I said out loud, "Sorry," because that's what you say when you bump a stranger's cart in a grocery aisle. That should have been enough of a scare. It wasn't. The smell was followed by heat that didn't make sense in air that cool. It came steady, a palm near my cheek. The little red fire truck on the grave nearest us gleamed like it had been licked. Rena lifted her head, eyes wet but steady. She said my name, just my first, and it startled me that she remembered. "Don't chase it," she said, reminding me of Rubio's warning without making a big production. Something about not chasing makes you realize you want to. That's the dumb part of the human brain that zips you across traffic to touch whatever's shiny. I had to plant my feet. Anna slipped her hand into mine. I could feel the chalky grit of dust on her skin. Somewhere nearby, the recorder's little red light blinked, patient as a heartbeat. Then we heard the footsteps. They were small and quick and wrong. If you've ever heard a child run when they're trying not to, it has this particular rhythm. Light, almost bird-like, with a catch where they decide if they're going to commit to a full sprint. These footsteps were that catch over and over, like someone deciding over and over again. They moved behind us and then ahead of us and then to the left. My eyes saw nothing. The headlamps made ovals on the ground that looked like shallow lakes. The smell thickened to the point I could taste an old penny on my tongue. Celeste whispered something that sounded like a prayer. "Hi," Anna said suddenly, too bright, the way she speaks to kids at her shop when they're trying to steal candy. "Hey, buddy. We're just visiting. You want us to go?" "We can go," a voice answered. I wish I could tell you we caught it on the recorder and I could play it back to an exact timestamp for you. Prove it was real. Maybe we did. Maybe I'll never listen to that file. But a voice answered. A small voice like a child standing exactly at knee height with a mouthful of ash. It said a single word, and I don't know if I'm proud or ashamed that I understood. It said, "Stay." I had an image then, sharp enough to be cruel, of a closet door where someone small had made a den out of old coats that smelled like smoke. I wanted to open the door and I wanted to run. Something told me the door was not mine to open. That's when the heat became a touch. Not a hand, I won't lie to you, but the suggestion of one. It lifted the loose edge of my sleeve and I felt a dead little crackle of warmth kiss my wrist. It left a mark. I didn't know until later. When I tell you the mark looked like you held your skin too close to a candle, I mean exactly that. No blister, just a blush and a faint brown line. I'd like to say I was braver than I was. The truth is, I said Anna's name like I did when she was 5 and ran toward the street. That hard syllable in her name that's half warning and half plea. She squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. Rena lifted her headlamp until the beam hung in the air like a ceiling light. "If you want us to stay, we can. If you want us to sit, we can, but we won't take anything. We won't light anything. We won't touch anything. We'll be quiet." The footsteps slowed. Where we'd heard them was silent, and instead I heard something soft and terrible. The little flap of fabric settling near an open window when AC kicks on. The heat pulled away. The smell thinned but didn't leave. Celeste said to the dirt, "I'm sorry," with a kind of weight in her voice that made me want to cry for reasons that had nothing to do with ghosts. Daniel, the sound guy, looked at his recorder like he didn't want to be the person holding a device between a story and the people in it. We stood there in a circle like campers without a fire, which is exactly what we were, and tried to breathe normally again. That's when a single thread of smoke, a real one, lifted off the cuff of my jacket. It was so thin I might have missed it if the headlamp hadn't caught it just right. It was like hair burning. I slapped it reflexively and felt a crusty flare gone as soon as my hand touched it. The smell bloomed sharp, then fled. Rena stepped closer without stepping on anything. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprised that I meant it. I pressed the spot and it was warm but not painful. My palm came away with a tiny smear of black that looked like I'd pinched a moth. I didn't bring anything that could spark. "Keys are in my pocket." "Sometimes it never touches you," Rena said. "Sometimes it does. If you ask me why, the answer is I don't know, and I'd rather not pretend." "You want to sit a minute?" We sat. You wouldn't think stone could feel respectful, but it did. We kept our beams low and let the sky speak. A plane blinked above the city like a slow heartbeat. The freeway whispered. A siren coughed and then went quiet. I realized I'd stopped tasting the smoke. It stayed in my hair, though, soft as if I'd been standing by a far-off brush pile. We might have left it at that. Honestly, we should have. But if you've ever been somewhere that feels like it shifted for you, you get greedy. You start thinking you're making contact because you deserve it. not because you happened to be in the right dice roll of a moment. Before we could do the wiser thing, a flashlight found us from the far path. It was not a ghost. It was a cop. Evening, he said, El Paso PD. He had the long, tired patience of someone who's told teenagers to leave parks after dark for 20 years. You guys got permission? Rena did the paper routine again. He nodded. Okay, just checking. We had a call. He didn't say from who. He cleared his throat, glanced at the children's section, softened. You smell it? The way he asked, like the smell was a weather report, made me think this was not his first midnight walkthrough. Rena said, We did. He tipped his head like, There you go then. Then his radio crackled, the faraway voice of another officer reading a plate. He asked if we'd be wrapping up soon, and I said yes too fast.
Anna looked at me like, Don't be rude.
Celeste thanked him. He nodded again and did the slow, careful walk away that keeps your beam low, so you don't spook the people you're leaving. We did start to wrap up. Rena likes to close with thanks the way some people close with a prayer. She keeps it secular but sincere. Thank you for letting us be here, she said, and we all repeated it. Thank you for the quiet. We took the recorder and the little thermometer and the radio that had behaved itself and started toward the gate in that tidy, respectful way you leave someone's home when they've fed you. On the way out, Mr. Rubio ghosted back, not literally, just with that graveyard stealth old men have. He squinted at me for a second and then pointed to my sleeve. Mind your laundry, he said. He tapped his chest. Sometimes you take it with you. Sometimes it keeps you honest. We said goodnight. The iron gate made that old hinge sound, like a throat clearing a final time. Outside the fence, the streetlight looked bright in a way that felt obscene. You know how headlights seem too white when you've been in a movie theater? It was like that. The city felt loud, rude. I half expected the smell to vanish when we got to the car and closed the doors. But when I buckled in, it puffed up from my jacket like a little sigh. Anna wrinkled her nose and then weirdly smiled. You're marked, she said. Teacher gets the gold star. At home, I hung the jacket on the back of a chair like I always do. The first odd thing happened the next morning. My apartment usually absorbs smells within an hour. That jacket kept it. A crisp thread running through the room when I walked past. I thought maybe it was in my head until the cat, my neighbor's orange menace who treats my place like a timeshare, stopped at the doorway, looked at the chair, and backed up with that offended cat look that says your vibes are wrong. He wouldn't come in. That cat once ate a bumblebee on my rug and only sulked for an hour, but he wouldn't cross the threshold. At school, I told myself to shake it off. Kids will either sharpen your sense of reality or sandblast it. Just after lunch, a fire drill set off the alarm, a scheduled one, and the hallway filled with that plastic beep sound that turns your bones into pencils. I shepherded 7th graders out to the field and watched as one of my quieter kids, a boy who jokes to cover his fear, froze by the door. The alarm was routine, nothing real about it, but his eyes skittered for a place that wasn't full of noise. Without thinking, I said, You want me to stay by you? He nodded like a brave dog. We stood in the shadow of the wall until the assistant principal waved us farther. There was a moment where a warm breeze licked at my sleeve that shouldn't have been warm, and that old penny taste blinked in my mouth. A boy behind me muttered, Smells like a toaster. It was gone in a second. I said to my insides, Don't chase it. That night I washed the jacket. Twice. Rena had told us not to take anything from Concordia, but she hadn't said anything about taking something invisible home by accident and then trying to drown it in detergent. The smell didn't leave. It softened. It moved into the fibers like a memory. I gave up and hung the jacket outside for the afternoon. When I checked it at dusk, the cotton at the cuff had a tiny, tidy brown kiss like a candle had gotten too close. The spot didn't spread. It didn't hurt. It just looked like something you'd touch and say ow to out of reflex. I tried not to talk about it because that's how you let a thing grow. Anna didn't make it easier. She texted me a link to the Cemeteries haunted tour page and a bunch of eyeball emojis. Rena sent me a voice note. If it lingers, just be polite in your house the way you were there. You don't need special words. Just say you're here and you're resting. That's enough. It sounded like advice about grief, which I guess it was. That would be tidy if this ended there. It didn't. It got odd in a way that felt less dramatic than a horror movie but more persistent than a dream. Over the next week, the smell would show up at weirdly considerate times. Never at 3 a.m. with a jump scare, more like when I'd come home from grocery shopping and put the bag on the counter. I'd catch a thread of smoke, I'd pause, I'd lower my voice without meaning to. I'd say hi, the way you do coming into your parents' house even after you're grown. I started saying goodnight to my living room like it was a guest on the couch. If you think that sounds dumb, good, I'm aware. I tried logic. I took the jacket to the dry cleaners on Montana. The lady behind the counter, glasses hanging on a chain, file folders like a catalog of lives, pinched the cuff and sniffed. "Campfire," she said. "Lucky." I didn't explain. I just nodded. It came back crisp, wrapped in crinkly plastic that made my apartment smell like promise. The smoke laughed at the plastic. Soft laugh, not mean. I hung it back on the chair like a treaty. The part that still jars me happened on day 10. You know how certain places in your home hold the sound of your foot better than others? The spot by my bookshelf has a little creak. The tile by the sink clicks if you step just so. That night, while I was grading quizzes, the tile clicked. It is not unusual for a house to make noise. What was unusual was the rhythm. It was small, quick, and it had that catch. The same deciding rhythm we heard in the cemetery. It went from sink to door to the chair, stopped. I muted the TV. I didn't turn in the chair or leap up or do the horror movie thing. I just said, gently, like Mr. Rubio told us, "Do you want me to leave?" I meant the room, my own living room. I was prepared to stand outside on the landing and let my apartment breathe. The air settled. The tile was quiet. The smell threaded up once, soft as a yes, then nothing. I haven't tried to get rid of it since. I'm not saying I believe something followed me home. I'm saying certain places hold a story the way fabric holds a smell, and you can choose whether to stand in front of a fan and air it out or tuck it in your pocket and see if it changes you. I still go to Concordia sometimes on a Saturday morning, when the sun makes the iron fences hot enough to brand memory into your fingers without touching them. I go in daylight. I bring water. I say morning to the names I recognize now like neighbors. I never bring flowers because it feels presumptuous, but I pick up the beer cap someone left crushed near a small stone and put it in the trash. Last week I saw Mr. Rubio again near the Chinese section. He was tightening a wire on an old fence with the stubborn patience of someone who understands time differently. He looked at my jacket cuff like he recognized the mark. "You minding your laundry?" he asked. "I am," I said. It's quiet." "Quiet's good," he said. "Quiet means it's settled." He flicked his eyes toward the children's section and then away. "Sometimes they like an ear. Should I stop coming?" The question surprised me. I hadn't known I wanted to ask it until it was out there, dumb and heavy like a kid asking if they're in trouble. Mr. Rubio thought about it, a long thought that gave the wind room to move. "If you come like someone visits family," he said, "you don't have to stop. Just don't come like someone's trying to cash a check." I thanked him. He went back to the wire. Tonight I finally sat down to write this. I don't expect anyone to believe it. Sounds and smells are low-proof evidence, but I keep thinking of that word in the dirt stay. Not shouted, not dramatic, a small ask. I've been trying to decide if it was for us or for him or for something in between. My jacket still smells wrong when I walk past the chair fast. It doesn't bother me. I've been worse haunted by living people. I'm not asking you to go to Concordia. If you do, don't tell yourself you're brave. Tell yourself you're walking into an ear. Leave your voice soft, like a neighbor leaning over a fence to say hello. And if you catch a thread of smoke in air that should not have any, don't chase it. Stand where you are. Say your name like you're introducing yourself. Ask if they want you to leave. Listen, right now the apartment is very still. A car drives by outside, a late one with music just loud enough to hear the bass and then fades. My clock ticks in the kitchen like it's trying to remember something. The jacket on its chair is a darker shape in the corner. I'm not looking at it. I don't need to. The smell doesn't come, but the sense of something careful does. Like the air leaned in a fraction to learn new words. I say goodnight to the room because I've made a habit of that, and habits shape us. Something in the far corner gives a soft, warm sigh as if a door that isn't there just closed. I tell myself it's pipes settling. I believe myself as much as I need to. And because it feels wrong to end without manners, I say thank you once to no one particular, and go turn off the lamp with the strange, absurd hope that in the dark, my apartment will feel the way the cemetery did for that long. Careful minute, quiet, present, and listening back. I've typed and deleted this a dozen times because the whole thing still feels like one of those half dreams you wake from, sticky with sweat, and convinced you heard your name in the hallway. But I keep thinking about the way the air tasted that night, salt and rust, and how the sound of rope stayed in my ears even after I was back home with every light on. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I just want to get it out of me long enough to sleep without leaving the TV on to drown out the creaking. I swear I still hear when the house settles. I grew up on the Texas coast, close enough to Galveston that you learn the hurricane dates like your grandparents' birthdays. I moved back last year for a cheap upstairs apartment, and the kind of job that pays the rent if you don't mind calluses and salt in the laundry, loading ice chests at a bait shop off Harborside Drive. My best friend, Luis, never left. He runs tours on weekends, ghost walks in the Strand, pirate legends for bachelorette parties. And when there isn't a tourist in sight, he'll still tell you a story if you're waiting on your coffee and you look even a little bored. Liz is my cousin on my mom's side. She's the steady one, a paramedic who seems to know every cop, bartender, and night shift nurse within 50 miles. The three of us were the kind of late night people who will drive around just to feel the windows down air and point at dark houses saying who used to live there and what happened and where the water came to in 2008. Old City Cemetery sits like a patchwork quilt stitched from different graveyards. The Hebrew section here, Trinity over there. A Confederate square, Odd Fellows, Potter's Field. Stone and brick and iron all leaning in on each other. You can walk from one century to the next in 30 steps. The statues cry black tears of mildew and salt. Fig roots shove at headstones from underneath. Angels look tired. The place isn't a secret, but locals treat it like an old family photo album. Don't paw through it unless you know what you're looking for. Every city with a cemetery has a story about a tree, and in Galveston they call it the hanging tree. Ask 10 people where it is, and you'll get 10 directions. Ask a bartender and she'll point with the bottle and say, "Don't go." Ask Luis and he'll grin like he's about to show you a card trick. The night this happened, the air was wet enough to drink. September heat, even after midnight, that tacky kind of warmth that makes your shirt stick between your shoulder blades. You know the sound of a too bright night. Insects sawing at the dark, gulls arguing somewhere by the wharf. A far horn on the channel you feel in your teeth. It was a Thursday. We had closed the bait shop early for a blown breaker, and I didn't feel like going home to my oscillating fan and the dog next door who howls at sirens. Luis texted, "You awake?" And I said, "Always," and he called before I could type more. "You want to see a piece of rope history?" He said. I told him I had work at 7. "It won't take long," he said, like men say when they're dragging you into a story. We picked up Liz at shift change outside the hospital. She still had her hair pinned back and a rectangle of gauze tape stuck to the back of her hand, the way medics carry the day with them, little souvenirs they don't notice. She slid into my back seat and said, "If this is another of your Victorian voodoo sea witch things, I'm going home." "It's botanical," Luis promised, and that made her laugh. He brought a thermos of cafeteria coffee that tasted like it had been scraped from a pan, and he kept refilling my cup even when I didn't want it. He was all fizz that night. I could tell he'd been reading things. He gets like that, too many tabs open in his head. "So," he said, "one tree can be lots of trees. Grafted roots, storm damage, new shoots, you know. People think the hanging tree was one branch over one spot, clean and obvious. It's not like that, it moved. It grew." "Trees don't move," Liz said, but she didn't say it like she believed it. The air outside the car windows was a greasy black for a few seconds and then blinked to orange as we passed under the next streetlight, then black again, like the night had a slow heartbeat. We parked on Broadway where the curb is chipped like old teeth and the crepe myrtles drip pink that turns gray in the dark. The cemetery gate there isn't locked, just a pair of iron leaves you can slide aside. The minute we stepped in, the air changed. Sounds go different in a place like that. Your voice lands on stone and comes back dull. The grass felt damp through my sneakers. We took the gravel path past a family plot with a chain around it, ringed like a low fence, and a mausoleum with a door someone had painted shut a long time ago. A cat the color of ash streaked ahead of us and disappeared behind a slab. "You brought us to see a cat?" Liz said. "I vote we name him Rope." "Laugh now," Luis said. He clicked on his flashlight and cupped his hand around it so it made a soft disc instead of a spear. "Just be respectful if we see anything. No jokes for real. I've done the cemetery at night thing before. Everybody here has. Usually when you're teenagers and you want to be a little scared without the real trouble that comes with houses and people. This felt different. I can't explain it. Maybe it was the way the wind kept trying to lift and then thinking better of it. So the leaves made a half sound like someone about to speak. Maybe it was the smell, sour, a little sweet, like old wood soaked long enough it forgot what it was. Maybe it was the city itself that night, the lights on Seawall Boulevard throwing up a faded glow, the thump of a base somewhere 3 blocks over, the big ships waiting offshore like black islands. The place felt awake. I kept wanting to apologize for walking on the grass. I know how that sounds, Luis led. He counts rows of headstones like they're streets. Here, he said. Pause. He crouched and played his light along the ground. A scatter of shells, crushed oyster laid down years ago and pushed off the path by rain and shoes, glittered like somebody had dusted the earth with sugar. You hear that? He said, and we all went still. I heard insects, the far horn again, my own breath in my throat and the soft clink of a loose chain hitting a gate in the breeze. Then I heard it. A sound like a wooden swing when you're too big for it. A long creak, pause, and a small answering sound as if a rope twisted and came back. The wind wasn't moving. Probably a flagpole, Liz said, but her voice had that almost whisper people use when there's a baby sleeping. No flags, Luis said. Come on, we wove deeper. The graves got older, names that didn't sound like anyone you know. Babies in a row from the same year, summer of yellow fever probably. A blank stone with unknown cut into it, and a stuck-on medallion that someone must polish because it caught all of our light at once. Here, Luis said again, softer. He pointed with the edge of his palm toward a tree that didn't look like much. It wasn't the one I expected. The dramatic limbs and Spanish moss they put in the tour flyers. This was a stout live oak with thick leaves and a scar where lightning must have taken a piece out of it decades back. Around the base of it, the grass was tamped flat in a rough circle, like people had been coming to stand under it with their heels dug in. I don't love this, Liz said. She put her hand on her radio like habit. It wasn't on, she was off, but it looked right there. The pose of someone who hears cries and sirens so often that even when you're supposed to be a person, your body remembers being a tool. It's a tree, I said, and I felt dumb the second my voice made the word. The longer we stood there, the more wrong it felt. The creak came again, easy like breath. No sway from the branches. No shift in shadow. Just that sound and a smell like old hemp. They used to bring them at dawn, Luis said. Not at night. People came to watch like church. There are old newspapers. I can show you. He wasn't performing. For once he wasn't telling it for a tip. He sounded like someone whose hobby had crossed into something that didn't want to be a hobby anymore. We weren't alone. I know how that reads, but listen. When you are truly alone outside at night, there's a particular way your neck feels. Open, too tall, the top of you isn't protected. This wasn't that. This was the hair on my arms asking a question. I turned my head like I'd heard my name. The light from Luis's flashlight caught something pale beyond the oak. A woman stepped between 2 headstones and stopped. She looked 40 or 60. You can't tell ages in uneven light. She wore a man's shirt over a dress and the shirt was too big. The cuffs folded back twice. Her hair was braided and looped, old-fashioned but neat. Liz said, "Ma'am," which is her paramedic voice for a scene you might have to control. The woman lifted one hand like she was about to wave. Then she dropped it and touched the inside of her wrist like her skin hurt there. "Are you lost?" I said, which felt ridiculous because we were the ones who shouldn't be there. She didn't answer. She looked past us at the oak. I don't want to turn this into wavy lines and ghost hunter talk. Try to picture this as calmly as you can. We stood there. The woman stood 30 feet away. The night leaned. The creak came again, and her head tipped like anyone would do if they heard a familiar sound behind a closed door. She took a step closer to the tree. Liz shifted to put herself between the woman and the trunk because that's the kind of person she is. But the woman wasn't going fast. She moved careful like her feet hurt. When she reached the circle where the grass was tamped down, she stopped. She looked up into the branches at nothing I could see. "You shouldn't," she said. Her voice was clear and soft, and it didn't bounce in the cemetery the way ours had. "I already did," she said next, and she smiled in the way sad people smile at pictures. If we'd left right then, I think I would have told this story as a weird moment, the kind your memory exaggerates into something better than it was. But Luis decided to be helpful.
He does that too.
He took a step forward and held his hand up like he was showing we meant no harm. Like she was a skittish animal. "Ma'am," he said, "do you want us to call someone?" "We can find the gate." His flashlight tilted with his hand. And for just a second, the light landed on the inside of her wrist where she was touching, and showed a bruise there. Not a pattern of fingers. Not anything dramatic, just a wide band, a different color than the rest of her. I've worked around ropes back of the shop long enough to know what a long rub looks like. "Don't," she said, not to him, not exactly. She said it to the tree in the same voice, and then she stepped backward and her heel slid in the damp grass and she stumbled. Liz reached her first. She didn't touch her. She braced her hands on her own knees and said, "You okay? Do you need water?" The woman looked at Liz like somebody who hasn't seen the ocean in 30 years looks at the Gulf the first time back. Something like awe and something like disbelief and something like they get the joke now. "I keep coming back," she said. She looked up at the branches again. "There was a crowd that morning," she said. "It was so quiet right before." She tilted her head like maybe she was listening to the past unspool, and when she did I could see it clearer. The oddness. She wasn't sweating. Everyone sweats in September here if you have blood. Her hair didn't frizz up in the wet. The hem of her dress wasn't dirty, even though the ground was stained dark around the tree like it had been damp a long time. She looked present, more present than we were, but not like us. "Come stand with us," Luis said. His voice had changed. He wasn't trying to perform or control. He sounded like he wanted to take some of the weight out of her mouth. She took one more step back without turning around, and then she was as close to the headstones behind her as she could get without leaning on them. She kept her hand on her wrist. She wasn't crying, but she was in that breathing before you cry kind of place. "You were here?" I said, and once I said it, there was no taking it back. She nodded. "We stood," she said. "We stood and the rope talked." I thought of the sound then and felt a kind of anger I don't know where to file. A stupid anger like when your car makes a noise and you don't have the money to fix it, but the noise keeps meaning something all the same. I don't know if it would have gotten worse or better if the caretaker hadn't come then. We heard the scrape of a boot, and a smaller light swept across our ankles, and a voice said, "No after hours," with a tiredness like he'd said it already that day. He was older, the caretaker, with a white mustache and a cap that had once said something before sweat took the letters. "Gates are closed at dusk," he said, and held up his phone like proof that the hour had passed. Liz started to explain. He waved her off. "I don't care about your YouTube," he said. "You'll step on somebody's mama. Out." He looked past us to where the woman stood and he said, "You too." The light from his hand landed there, and there was no one. 1 second she was where she had been, breathing, not sweating, touching her wrist, and the next there was an empty place where she should be, and the circle of tamped grass and the sound again, longer now, rope telling some story in a voice I hate that I know. The caretaker didn't break. He looked tired in the kind of way that has nothing to do with sleep. He nodded once and then he didn't look at the tree again. "Out," he said, and he walked us back the way we came. He kept his light pointed at the path and exactly nowhere else. "I'm not going to write your plates if you don't make me chase you," he said. He held the gate and we went through it into the big normal dark of the street. It felt like stepping out of a movie theater at noon. My eyes didn't know where to look for a minute. Heat off the asphalt, a moth batting at a streetlight. An empty beer can in the gutter that knocked when the wind tried to push it and failed. "People come looking for dead husbands and folk heroes," the caretaker said then, quiet. "This ground is full of names no one says. Best thing is to leave them be." He slid the gate closed. "Don't bring coffee," he added. "I won't drink it." We stood there like idiots for a second. Cars went by. Somewhere somebody laughed like they'd been drinking and were at the part of the night before the fights. Liz put her hands on the iron and pressed her forehead to it the way you might at church if church made any sense to you. "I don't want to go home yet," she said. Luis didn't either. I knew because he started talking, filling the space, telling stories about how a tree is just a thing until you hang a meaning on it, about how in old newspapers they print dates and sentences like, "The matter concluded without incident," about how the sea remembers even when people forget. "My grandmother used to say this island is 2 islands," he said. "The one you can see and the one the water shows you if you ask wrong. We ended up at the all-night diner on 61st. We sat at the counter and ordered pie because that's what you do in America when you Don't know what to say next. At the diner, everything is bright and too clean in a way that fools you into thinking it has always looked like that. The waitress had a name tag that said Cynthia, and the kind of glasses you can slide up and wear on your head like a headband. She called us honey and filled coffee we didn't want again until our cups were an inch from the rim. The TV over the pie case played a baseball game from the West Coast with the sound off. "You look like you saw a ghost," Cynthia said when she put down the plates. Luis laughed as practice. "We saw a tree," when he said. "That'll do it," she said. She walked away before we could ask what she meant. Behind us, a table of men argued over whether a truck would fit under the new overpass on Ferry Road. Every time the door opened, the Salt Knight leaned in and then was cut by the air conditioning. The world seemed to have decided what to pay attention to, and it wasn't us. While we ate, Liz kept her eyes on the glass door and the neon beer sign beyond it like she needed to watch the night or it would sneak up. She kept working her thumb over her own wrist, a mirror of what the woman had done without meaning to. Her skin is darker than mine, and there's a patch on the inside of her wrist where an IV tape once took the top layer off and left a pale oval. That oval looked white as paper under the diner lights. She said not loud, "I don't like that she said I already did." I didn't either. Louis said, "There's a story," but he stopped. He looked down at the triangle of pie without seeing it. "She had pretty hair," he said instead, and for some reason that made my throat tight. We paid and went back out to the parking lot. Everything felt too far away and too close at the same time. Like when the storm hasn't hit yet but your dog hides under the table and the sky looks wrong, even though you can't point to why. I didn't sleep. I didn't think I would, and I was right. The creak came with me, mild as a neighbor's porch swing on a morning you don't have to be anywhere. I kept telling myself it was all suggestion. If you stand in a place with a story long enough, your brain puts the picture together out of whatever's at hand. I put the radio on low so I wouldn't think about rope. At 4 a.m., my upstairs neighbor came home and his boots walked his living room, and I could trace the path of his feet because our floor plans are twins. I tried not to think about paths under a tree. I tried not to think about how the caretaker had said, "You too," and then not been surprised. I put my phone under my pillow like a kid, like it could do anything more there than it could on the nightstand. When I did sleep, I woke. The creak had woven itself into my room's sounds, fan and fridge and the distant wash of a truck on Broadway. The next day, I told myself not to tell anyone at work. I told myself not to Google. I told myself to be a person who doesn't need to explain everything. That lasted until lunch. I looked up old Galveston newspapers on my phone and read dry lines with sharp teeth. A crowd gathered, sentence carried out. Not more than a quarter hour. Little sentences like staples holding a heavy thing together. I looked up hanging tree and got photos of a different oak entirely. I looked up lightning scars on live oaks, and that at least was something you can measure and explain. Sap boils, bark bursts, wood burns in a line. I told myself we had scared ourselves. I told myself we had interrupted a woman who maybe lives near there and walks at night because the heat is kinder after midnight. I told myself a lot of things. Then an hour before closing, my phone buzzed. Liz had texted, "Call me right now." When I called, she answered on the first ring and breathed like she'd been jogging. "I know," she said without hello. "I know this could be nothing. It's probably nothing. I'm not being dramatic." "Okay," I said, strolling away from the display freezer like a person leaving a conversation. "I had a call this afternoon," she said. "Bruise on her wrist." Not the same woman. This one was 19 and so angry at herself for getting locked out that she cried when we got her back inside. But when I touched her arm to look, it felt like my fingers went numb for a second. You know when your foot falls asleep and the top feels too heavy? Like it knows gravity more than it should? Like that, only it was my hand. And then she said I already did, and she wasn't talking to me. She said it like the words were already in the air and she had to say them too. It went away, the numb. She was fine. It was probably just me. "But I don't want to sleep tonight." She laughed a little, only it wasn't a real laugh. "I put a chair under my bedroom door because I'm an idiot," she said. "Chairs under doors are for movies. If somebody wants to come in, they'll come in." Luis texted too, "You hear that?" And a second later sent a voice memo that was nothing but room tone and then, faintly, a sound. If you played it for me yesterday morning, I would have said it was a swing set from down the block or a ship cable shifting or an old hinge. It was a rope lifting and changing its mind. I almost deleted it as soon as I heard it, like deleting it would unmake it. I didn't. I put the phone face down and worked the last hour of my shift with my hands doing what they knew without me. Seawater makes everything smell like something else. I'd never noticed how much the bait shop smelled like old rope until that afternoon. We promised to meet before dark because we are, despite our years, children sometimes who think problems hold their shape in daylight. We decided not to go back to the cemetery. We show up there like we're asking for it again, Liz said. We'll go to the seawall. We'll sit with everybody else. We'll pretend this is a normal life. That's what we did. We got paper cups of fries and sat on the low wall with our backs to the Gulf and watched people go by in pairs and groups and alone. A guy with a t-shirt that said Doc Dad. Girls with damp hair carrying their sandals. A woman pushing a stroller with a kid already asleep floppy as laundry. You can always tell who's local by shoes. Locals wear ugly ones that won't slip on green concrete. Tourists slide. We sat and ate fries and told ourselves stories about the lives that walked past us. We didn't talk about rope until the sky went that particular Galveston color that's all at once bruise and peach and silver. When we did talk about it, we did that thing where each one of us tried to be the brave one so the others could ride behind. There's a whistle some fishermen hear at night when the barometer drops, Luis said. It's just air and metal. It doesn't mean anything. Sometimes when I drive past the courthouse at 2 a.m., I swear I see someone standing by the steps, Liz said. It's shadows. There are 7 lights there and they confuse your eyes. I left the TV on and I hate when people do that, I said. I'm mad at myself for wasting the electricity. We were trying to prove we were still the kind of people who could add up a day and have it equal a day. Then the streetlight above us hissed and brightened and stayed too bright like it wouldn't be able to help itself later. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. No one had called. The message was 8 seconds of nothing and then, distantly, the sound. I let it play on speaker. People walked by. None of them turned their heads. I know what you're thinking. We were scaring each other. People can make almost anything a pattern if they take turns pointing. That's fair. Plenty of what we call haunting is just 4 walls and a reminder you can't unsay your own name. But the next part, I can't make it into something ordinary no matter how I tilt it. It was late by then. We had been sitting long enough that the Gulf looked level with the street and the neon across became the only bright things. We walked to our cars. We said we'd text when we got home. I drove the long way past the hospital because the right turns feel easier. It was one of those nights where every window in every house you pass holds a different color TV light, and you want to smile into each one and say, "You're okay in there. Keep being okay." I turned onto my street and my headlights floated over the live oak in my neighbor's yard. The one that drops acorns like ball bearings and makes everyone slip one day in October. There was a piece of rope on the lowest branch. Not a noose, not a loop. Just a length tied in one of those good knots you learn from someone who knows knots. I could have hooked it and taken it down with the broom I keep on the porch for spiders. I didn't. I parked and sat with the engine ticking and watched nothing move but the bugs in the headlight beam. I cut the engine and the quiet jumped all at once and there it was. The sound. Not from the rope. From the space under it. From where air pretends to be a body if you listen wrong. I locked my car from the inside because I'm my mother. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to count to 10. On 4, the neighbor's dog began to howl. I've never liked that dog. I liked him then. He howled and then sang, which is what he does when he doesn't know why he's howling, but it feels good. Lights came on in 2 houses. A man's voice said something I couldn't hear and the dog was quiet. The sound kept going, easy, conversational, a rope telling old jokes to itself. I called Luis without telling myself I wouldn't. He answered like he'd been holding the phone. On my porch, he said. There's a line. I didn't put it there. I said, me neither. He said, don't touch it. I said, I'm not an idiot. And the word idiot sounded meaner than I meant it. He said a second later, very quiet. What does yours smell like? Like we could smell a sound through a phone. Like the bait shop, I said. Like wet hemp. Yeah, he said. Okay. Then he said, because he can't help himself, maybe it's just kid. And then he laughed once at how tired that sounded. I feel like I should cut it down, I said. I feel like if I cut it down, I'll invite something I don't want invited. He said, we could both cut them down at the same time. Like a weird science experiment. We sat in our separate cars on our separate streets with the same sound in our ears for 10 seconds. And then I said, no. I don't know why. I just needed to say it out loud. I didn't sleep at home that night. I drove to Liz's, which sits in a narrow lot with an alley and a chain-link gate you have to lift and jiggle to shut. She opened the door as I pulled up like she'd been waiting and stepped aside so I could go past her without putting my bag down. "Don't say it," she said. "I don't want to make it more by making it words." We sat on her couch with our shoes on and the TV playing a cooking show with the volume low. Every time they said words like fold and binding mixture, I thought rope. She made tea and never took a sip. At 2, she said, "I'm an adult and I'm going to bed," and then slept sitting up with her mouth open like a little kid. I drifted. The rope in my neighbor's tree creaked across town just quiet enough that a person can convince himself the sound in his head is only in his head. I woke to my phone vibrating. 5 a.m. A text from an unknown number with no message, only a photo. For a second, I thought it was the cemetery tree at night. The angle was low, the branches in silhouette, the dark of ground that doesn't want to be stepped on. Then I realized it was the live oak on my street. My neighbor's mailbox in the corner of the frame. The rope length hanging exactly where my headlights had found it. No person in the picture, no shadow. Only the street, the tree, the line. I called the number back because of course I did. It went to a generic voicemail box with that voice you get when someone never set it up. I saved the photo before I could think better of it. When the sun came up, I drove home. The rope was gone. The branch had a scuff where it had been. The street smelled like wet lawn and morning. The dog next door snored like an old man. You know that feeling when you almost remember a dream and then the coffee bumps it out of your hands? That. I looked up and down the block like the person with the rope might still be there, proud of nothing. Nothing moved but a plastic bag lifted and dropped in the gutter by air I couldn't feel. You want me to say we went back to the cemetery to end it, to apologize, to learn something, to break the spell? We didn't. We stayed away. Liz said the caretaker's name is Mr. Kemp, and that he's the kind of man who sees what he sees and doesn't trade it for attention. She asked around at the hospital for old-timers who remember stories and found plenty. The way you find shells if you dig anywhere on the island. People have always heard things at that tree that don't match the wind. People have always seen someone there who looks like someone from the wrong century. Louise found a clipping about a woman who pulled at her own wrist as they walked her, like the rope was already there. He didn't send it to us. He printed it and put it in a folder like that would keep it still. He stopped doing tours for a few weeks. When he started again, he avoided the cemetery and told pirate stories about men who deserved what they got, and the water that forgave them anyway if they learned to float. It faded, like everything. The creak became a sound my house made in the early morning. The photo in my phone moved down the gallery. My neighbor trimmed the oak and the branch that had held the rope went into the back of his truck, and then I heard the grinding of the mulcher, and thought about small pieces of a larger thing. I put talc on my hands at work so the hemp smell wasn't the only smell. Liz started sleeping with her radio off again. She still presses her thumb to the inside of her wrist when she's thinking. She probably always did, and we just noticed it more. We didn't say the words I already did out loud if we could help it. We didn't call what we heard anything except that noise. I told myself a tree is a tree, roots and leaves, reach and hunger. I told myself sounds are just sounds, air and friction and meaning we pour into them like water in a jar. Last week, I'm writing this on a Monday, the weather broke for an hour. A cold front tried to make itself known and the air dropped 10 degrees and the whole town went outside like someone rang a dinner bell. I walked. I didn't mean to walk to the cemetery. My feet took me, the way your body remembers the grocery aisles you grew up shopping even if they move the bread. I stood across Broadway and looked at the iron gate and the summer black behind it and told myself I'd cross when the light changed. I didn't. A gull screamed once and then laughed at itself. Somewhere a kid hit a chain-link fence with a stick, and then clear as my name the sound came from inside. Not far away, not behind me, not in my head. A rope, old and oiled by hands and years, remembering a weight. I didn't move. A woman spoke. She said, "Don't," in a voice soft as prayer, and then, not louder but closer, she said, "I already did." I waited for something else, something dramatic. Nothing came. The wind lifted and let go. The light changed twice. I went home. If you ask me what I think, I'll say this. Some places hold their shape long after the wood is gone. A knot can stay in the air the way salt stays on your tongue after you leave the beach. If you stand still, the island will tell you two stories at once. The one where everything is fine and the one where it isn't, and you have to live in both. I don't go back at night. I take the long way around the block so I don't pass my neighbor's tree even though the branch is gone. My phone still has the photo. Sometimes late a voicemail shows up with no number 8 seconds long. I don't play them. I delete them without listening because I am trying to be a person who sleeps. But every so often, when the AC clicks, often the quiet opens like a door, I hear it anyway. Creak, pause, creak, and I can't tell if it's outside or inside or if that even matters. If you live here, you don't need me to tell you this is a city that knows how to stack grief like sandbags. If you don't live here, maybe that's all you need to know. The oak at Old City Cemetery isn't the biggest or the prettiest or the one you'll take a picture of. You might walk right past it in daylight and only later feel like you forgot to duck. I don't know if we met a ghost. I don't know if the rope ever left. I only know the sound of it, the old tired talk of fiber against wood, and the way a stranger touched her own wrist and smiled like someone who had already written the last page, and still turned it with both hands. I tell you this because the sound followed me home, and I don't think sounds can get tires the way people do. It's quiet right now. The fan is humming. A truck just went by and the light across the street blinked and came back. But when the wind forgets itself and goes still, and the house remembers every weight it ever carried, I can hear it again. Slow, patient, like something that isn't waiting at all. And I lie there, eyes open, counting the seconds between breaths, wondering if I am hearing what already happened or what already will. I didn't grow up scared of cemeteries. My mother taught at the university in Lubbock and used to grade papers in the car, while I biked in lazy loops around the old stones on summer evenings. That sounds weird typed out, but the cemetery near 31st and Teak was quiet, shaded and safe long before the podcasts and YouTube channels turned it into a scavenger hunt for Buddy Holly's grave. I could trace a map of that place from memory, where the Norfolk pines lean, where dust collects under the lip of the stone benches after a wind, where the sprinklers sputter at dusk and surprise the rabbits. I'm saying this so you trust me when I say I know how the place should feel. I know when it feels wrong. I wasn't planning to spend any more evenings there as an adult. I live in Fort Worth now. My sister Jess dragged me back this spring because our old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, passed, and her son asked Jess to handle the service since he couldn't travel. Jess is that kind of person, organized to a fault, a magnet for errands that aren't technically hers. I came to help her with chairs, folding tables, the water coolers people never drink from but take comfort seeing. We met the grounds foreman, a soft-spoken man named Aaron Del Rio who had a clipboard and sun-creased cheeks. He knew the Pattersons from church and pointed us to a place under a live oak near the west edge, where the grass thins because the soil goes sandy. There were maybe 20 of us that afternoon. The sky was spotless blue, so bright that even black slacks looked dusty. Lubbock light chews everything down to the same color. A train horn from God knows where cut the pastor off twice and everyone smiled, glad for the interruption. It was the usual small-town service, quiet, decent, unremarkable. Until it wasn't. But that part didn't come until after, when people were folding programs into fans and drifting toward cars. Jess noticed him first. "Do you see that man?" she asked, tightening her ponytail the way she does when she's trying to act casual. By the fence, I turned. The west fence runs along a field that used to be cotton and is now an empty lot studded with scrub. There are no shade trees there, just chain link and a straight view into forever. The man she meant was standing at the far edge, farther than you'd expect anyone to stand to watch a small funeral. Tall, thin, black suit or black something that read as a single shape against the sheen of late light. No hat, no motion. If he'd been closer, I would have waved or nodded, one of those small West Texas courtesies. He was too far for that, and besides, he didn't feel like a courtesy person. He felt like a landmark. "Buddy Holly tourists," I said, because it was the quickest normal explanation. "They wander over everywhere." "But his back is to us," she said. And she was right. He wasn't watching us or even the cemetery. He was facing west, out toward the lot, a mirror to the old homesteader statue near the entrance, gazing into nowhere. Jess doesn't spook easily. She's been an ER nurse. She's rinsed blood from her shoes and gone out for tacos after.
It just makes me feel.
I don't know, she said. Like a scarecrow somebody dressed for court? I offered. Her smile was brief. Something like that. We carried the coolers to the truck. Twice more I glanced back at him. Twice more he hadn't moved. You know that feeling when you almost forget a face and then remember it later exactly the same way? That's how he sat in my mind as we said goodbye to the Pattersons and promised to drop off the leftover cookies. A fixed silhouette at the edge of attention. We went to Spanky's for fried cheese because that's what you do when the sky is too bright and the old place feels like its bones are showing. We got a booth and the waitress was a girl with a diamond nose stud who called me sir and called Jess girl, which made her day. Halfway through my second tea, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen since high school. Oscar Morales. He'd stayed in Lubbock, works at a print shop, does those memorial pictures on canvas when people want a face in the living room forever. You back in town? The text said. Are you working at the cemetery now? Or just visiting? Helping Jess with a service. Why? There was a long pause, a typing bubble, then nothing. 10 minutes later, you going there at night? Don't, I'll call you later. I didn't respond because it felt like he wanted me to ask and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Jess saw my face and arched an eyebrow. Oscar, she said. Haven't heard that name in forever. He thinks I'm taking up cemetery work, I said. And he told me not to go there at night. Okay, she said, chewing, unimpressed. Let's not. And that could have been the end, except Jess realized we'd left an extra folding table, and because she's conscientious to a fault, we had to go back before the gates locked. Lubbock Cemetery officially closes at dusk, but the truth is it's a patchwork of short visits after hours. A dad walking a stroller to a great-grandma's stone because he promised. An old man watching the horizon turn the field into lake. I told myself that as we drove back down 34th Street and turned under the wrought iron arch. The air had shifted. The heat went soft and the wind had picked up, tasting like dry plaster. Sprinklers stuttered lazy arcs against chain link. Lights at the perimeter clicked on one by one. Our table was right where we left it, leaning like a folded spine beside the live oak. Jess took one end and I took the other. The legs rattled against their latches. The sound made all that space feel suddenly unreasonable. The world gets bigger right at dark, like it pulls breath. I felt it then and pretended I didn't. When we turned to go, I glanced instinctively toward the west fence. The lot beyond it had turned from blank sun-baked tan to the color of a bruise. The silhouette was still there, still facing away. Only now it seemed, no, I won't say closer because I don't want to claim a thing I can't prove. I'll say larger, like when a plane changes altitude and you don't see it move, but somehow it's more itself than a second ago. I blinked water out of my eyes and shifted the table higher on my hip. And when I looked again, I had the stupid thought that he'd grown in the time my eyelids were closed. Jess felt me hitch the table and followed my eyes. I watched her face go flat the way it does when she's forcing her voice to be calm. Put the table in the truck, she said soft. Then we're going to leave this place. We did. We slid the table in, clanged the tailgate, got in, locked doors automatically like a horror movie. I let the engine run a full seconds longer than necessary before shifting into reverse. The headlights swung out and painted the fence for a moment, a ribbon of gold on chain link and scrub. The silhouette cut that gold in a clean line. It was not a bush. It was not a post. It was not a trick of a tired eye. It was a tall human shape that accepted light and kept none of it. We didn't talk until we were on 27th. Lubbock at night is empty in a way that makes your tires sound like your bones. Jess finally said, "The Watcher." And that was the first time I heard the name out loud. You heard that from who? I asked. The ER gets everything, she said. Injured teenagers, drunk undergrads, guys mowing on a slope with sandals, and the talk that comes with them. Last year, a girl with a sprained wrist because she ran in a cemetery and slipped in the grass. She said she was running because she looked away, and when she looked back it had moved. She called it the Watcher like that was a proper noun. I didn't think about it again until today. At home that night, I put my phone face down and tried to watch a game. I couldn't stop seeing that edge of chain link and the single black cut in it. Oscar called twice. I let it go to voicemail twice. On the third call, Jess threw a pillow at me. Answer him, she said. He knows something and it's making you play stubborn. I put him on speaker, and his voice was deeper than I remembered, with that Lubbock drawl that makes everything sound like a punchline even when it isn't. He didn't bother with small talk. You saw it, he said. I know you did. Your face on the way out looked like you were carrying a hot pan. What is it? Jess asked. People call it the Watcher, Oscar said. I don't care what it's called. I care that people go out there to see it, and sometimes I make prints for their mothers later. Not because it kills them, he rushed to add. Don't get dramatic. Because the plain fact of it scares kids into doing dumb things. Jumping fences. Running in the dark. Daring each other to throw rocks at it. They trip, they break ankles. A kid took a chain-link barb through his side. Nothing fatal, but it makes a mess. Their friends start telling the story, and then someone else goes. Jess leaned forward on the couch as if Oscar could see it. Does it move? Not when you're looking, he said. That's the line, right? But I don't think that's accurate. I think it moves in the part of the world where your attention isn't. Peripheral. Between blinks. In the cut when your head turns from left to right. You don't see it take a step. You notice it's closer and do the math you can live with. Is there a person doing it? I asked. I can't tell you that, he said quietly. I can tell you Del Rio put up a trail cam last summer and the footage corrupted. I can tell you I was out there once at dawn to hang a banner for the cleanup day. And there was a long mark in the grass that looked like someone dragged a refrigerator upright from the fence to the old potter's field. I can tell you there are unmarked graves west of the newer stones, and some of them sink after a rain. If I were inclined to make connections, I'd make them there. You ever look away on purpose? I asked before I could stop myself. To see if it... You know. He didn't answer. Jess made a face at me like I'd asked for a hurricane. Finally, he said, I'm not proud of being 25 once. I was stupid. I walked the fence line with 2 buddies. We brought headlamps and measured paces like that would keep us safe. You can rationalize anything if you think you're the first person to be scientific about it. We took turns turning around. It was fun until it was terrifying. There was a point where turning back felt worse than finishing, like leaving a math problem unsolved. That's when I got mad at it. Not scared, mad. I turned my head left and right fast like I was trying to catch a fly. Somewhere in there, my stomach dropped. I knew I'd given it what it wanted if it wants anything. That night, I woke up to my closet door open. Probably nothing. That's how I have to live with it. I still sleep with a chair leaned under the knob. That's how I live with that part. We were quiet for so long my phone dimmed. When he finally spoke again, he gave us the kind of advice you give children because it works on adults too. Don't go back, he said. Curiosity is more dangerous than whatever that thing is. That cemetery gives people the idea they're in on a secret, because Buddy Holly is there, because there are unmarked stones, because the wind sounds like whispering when it's only dry grass. You're not in on anything. You're just visiting a place that feels like a story. There's a difference. We thanked him and hung up. I slept badly. My dreams were practical, not gothic. Improvised headlamps, measuring tape, the feeling of braces on my teeth again. In the morning, Jess made coffee and wouldn't look at me for a full minute, the way she does when she's deciding whether she's going to forbid something or go along and supervise it. If you're going to go, she finally said, you're going to do it in daylight and not alone. I should have told her I wasn't going anywhere. I should have gone to deliver the extra cookies to the Pattersons and left town. Instead, I texted Oscar and asked him to meet us. He refused at first, then relented, and we met in the gravel turnout by the maintenance shed where Del Rio was tinkering with a pump that coughed like an old dog. He watched us with tired eyes and didn't ask questions beyond, "You kids brought water?" which is the most West Texas safety lecture there is. His lip twitched when we headed west instead of east toward the famous grave. He didn't call us back. Maybe he'd learned that never works. In daylight, the far fence was just a fence. The lot beyond it looked like a place a developer parked promises. The Watcher wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. Every story I'd heard placed it at dusk or night. In the bright noon, all I could see was a slight difference in the grass along the line of the fence, as if many pairs of feet had paced there and pressed it down. We walked anyway, Jess in a baseball cap, Oscar in a sun-bleached tee, me with a notebook because pretending to make observations made me feel braver. The Potter's Field lies west of the main drives, a wide lean of ground that was used when the town was young and poor. Some graves are marked with concrete blocks that have lost any lettering. Some are dips where the soil settled over years and never got filled. I had taken those bike loops through every part of the cemetery as a kid, but I don't think I ever understood what I was rolling over out there. We stopped talking without agreeing to stop. The wind made the chain link sing a small tin note I found I wanted to put my palm against, the way you touch a source to prove it. Oscar pointed with his chin. "There," he said. At first I thought he meant a plastic grocery sack snagged in the fence. Then I realized he'd indicated the line of the horizon itself, where the blue graded to a color you can't name because there's nothing in a box of crayons for dust blue. A small black upright nicked it, far beyond the cemetery but aligned with our sightline through the chain link. It wasn't a tree. There are no trees that far west until you hit someone's yard, and even then they're bent. It wasn't a pole. It looked like a man far away standing at the far edge of somewhere we couldn't reach. It could be a ranch hand out there, Jess said. A suggestion more than a belief. Sure, Oscar said, his voice soft. Let's agree it could be anything. We stood there too long for any normal human activity. The black nick did not alter. The sun ate the details out of my retina, so when I blinked, I saw a copy of it in green. Jess finally swore under her breath and turned to look at me like she was going to scold me for dragging her out. Her eyes passed over me and toward the chain link behind us. They widened. I knew what she would say before she said it, and I felt the vertigo of it like a drop. There, she whispered. By the gate now. We had not heard footsteps. We had not heard a gate. We had not heard anything but wind and the small, strange music of the fence. At the western vehicle gate, 200 yards north and inside the cemetery, stood a black, upright column of man-shaped absence. It had not been there when we came. I know that as surely as I know my own name. I would have clocked it. That's how attention works. You find a thing and peg it so you can release your attention. I hadn't pegged anything by that gate. Now there was a thing to peg. Oscar didn't look long. He pivoted so fast his shoe threw gravel. Nope, he said, a word so remarkably ordinary it broke something tense in me. He didn't look at it again. He looked at us, at our feet, at the direction he wanted our feet to go. I wasn't that smart. I took one more look at the knot man by the gate. I tried to see fabric. I tried to force a brim or a nose or a blink on it. I got nothing but the sense of scale you get when you stand beside the wings of a grounded airplane, closer than before. Too close given the minutes between. Walk, Jess said, catching my sleeve. We did. We walked like good citizens away from the thing and toward Del Rio's shed. And the world took on that close-up clarity that comes when you've decided not to sprint, only because sprinting would admit something you can keep suspended if you move at the pace of errands. We didn't talk. It was a long walk. Halfway there, Oscar said, steady as a metronome, do not turn your heads. Pretend you are fighting about what to make for dinner. Pretend you are very annoyed with me for something I said in high school. Tell me you never should have dated me. Keep your eyes on the road. I never dated you, Jess said, stepping too hard on a gopher mound. You were into chess and I was into not being bored. There we go, Oscar said. Anger is great. Use anger. I'm not angry, Jess said. I'm not. I spoiled it. I glanced. It wasn't curiosity. It was an old habit of mine, scanning the room for exits. This was outdoors. There were no rooms. My eyes flicked left and the world stuttered the way a video stutters when a frame is dropped. The air felt thinner for one breath, as if I'd stepped into the wake of a train I hadn't heard. The black figure at the gate was no longer at the gate. It was 10 yards nearer than it should have been if it had moved at any normal speed. It occupied a place beside the road now. A place I knew intimately because for 20 years I'd biked that exact curve and called it the turn past the broken angel, after a statue with its wing cracked off. It stood where I would have clipped it with my handlebar if it had ever been there before. I didn't scream. I made a sound of disgust at myself, like I'd dropped a slice of pizza face down. I looked, I said, a confession without confession. I'm sorry. Keep walking, Oscar said. We are not the first people to be exactly this dumb. We reached the shed like people reach a finish line they didn't train for. Brittle, giddy, unsure if their legs will keep doing normal things like standing. Del Rio watched us from under the bill of his cap and did not say, I told you so, because he hadn't told us anything. He only said, thirsty, and slid a cooler closer with a boot. I drank water like I owed it money. Jess sat down on the concrete lip and put her head between her knees. I could tell she was doing the counting thing she does that she says keeps panic where it belongs. Oscar leaned on the fender of the work truck until the red left his face. Some kid last week brought a laser pointer, Del Rio said finally, as if picking up a conversation we'd been having. He wanted to see if it reflected on anything that wasn't there. It didn't. Boy got bored and went home. So maybe that's all it is. Something that makes kids bored in a dangerous place. He didn't mean it. The dust at the edge of his boots told the truth. He wasn't standing still. He was braced. If this were fiction, here's where I'd tell you we went back at night with better instruments and learned the rules. We didn't. We went home and pretended to forget how it felt to have the world skim past in a blink. Oscar sent a thumbs up later that read to me like we lived, which is funny because we were never in mortal danger so far as I know. That's the part I can't really explain to people who want a monster. Sometimes there isn't a mouth. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is the way something insists itself into your routines. Because here's what did happen after. I started noticing it in other places. Not head on. In the skim at the edge of errands. I'd be at United picking up tortillas and feel a drop of pressure in my ears and think the automatic doors had closed. Then I'd glance across produce and, for a blink length only, a black upright absence would make the straight lines of shelving look bent, like heat above a road. I'd blink and grapes would be simply grapes and I'd go back to being a person in a store. At the gas station by the loop, I looked up while the pump clicked and thought an oil stain on the glass of the canopy looked like someone standing beyond it, until a moth landed and fuzzed the edge. And I was so grateful to that moth I almost laughed. My eyes got tired in a new way. The way your wrist gets tired if you stop wearing your watch and keep looking for it anyway. Jess felt it too, though she would deny that. She started sliding our bolt at the house, which we'd never bothered with before. Once, when a neighbor kid came to return a casserole dish, she jumped like the doorbell was a firecracker. She kept telling herself out loud that none of this made sense and that telling yourself something twice did not make it more real. Then she got quiet about it because her voice tired her. A week later, I drove back to Fort Worth and the highway felt greedy, like it wanted me to stare straight down its throat. Somewhere near Abilene, a squall blew up out of a blue sky and slapped the windshield so hard my wipers stuttered. When the sheet of water slid down and the world reassembled, there was a black upright thing in my side mirror at the far edge of the shoulder. I know it was a mile marker. I know miles are marked. I also know what it feels like when an idea sits in your peripheral vision like it paid for the seat. I turned the radio up and listened to a man talk about cattle futures like it mattered. If you've read this far waiting for blood, you can stop now. Lubbock Cemetery still sits on its square of land, and people still leave guitar picks at Buddy Holly's stone, and teenagers still dare each other to go at night. The cops cruise past and flash their lights and shoot kids. Del Rio fixes sprinklers and mows. There's no crime report I can link you to, no local man vanishes. That's not the kind of story this is. The only person who disappeared in this story is me a little bit. The part of me that could stand at a fence and say with my whole chest that the only things on the other side are things I can name. I went back one more time before I left town, because I am who I am, because I wanted to end it on my terms. I went at sunset alone after telling Jess I was getting ice. The place was empty. The wind sounded like someone shuffling paper. I stood near the old potter's field and didn't look for it and didn't not look for it. I talked under my breath to the unmarked dips. I said that if anybody was listening, I was doing the respectful thing, standing, not stomping, not filming, not asking for a show. I told them my mom graded papers right here when I was 10 and I never had a bad dream about it. I stood there until the shadow of a cedar hit my shoes. I thought about all the things that watch us that we never notice because they're supposed to be there. The scan of a checkout camera, a teacher in a cafeteria, a neighbor watering at 9 p.m. so the water doesn't evaporate. I turned my head left to look at a scatter of pebbles a rabbit had kicked across the road, and then to the right to make sure my car was still alone. I felt the air thin on that turn, and when I looked straight ahead again, my eyes filled with water in that way they do when you walk into wind. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. The only thing that changed was the shape of my thinking. There's a line of old stones near there, low ones that sit almost flush with the earth. Someone had set a plastic cup of wildflowers on one of them, and the stems had slumped so the petals faced the grass. I wouldn't have noticed those flowers before. I noticed them now, the way they refused to look at the sky. That's not proof of a thing except the thing that was already true. I was not the same person who'd ridden a bike here and called it a safe place. On the way out, a white truck idled by the maintenance shed. A cop sat inside with the windows down, chewing sunflower seeds and spitting shells. He nodded at me and said, "You see him?" Like we were talking about a neighbor who doesn't pick up his trash cans. "I don't know what I saw," I said, and I've never meant words more. He spat a shell and squinted toward the west fence. "People come tell me it's a hoax," he said. "People come tell me it's grief. People come tell me it's the devil. My granddad's over there in the unmarked section somewhere. He worked at a cotton gin when he was 12. Cut his hand, bled on money for a week. He taught me to put water out for what you can't see. So I do that. I keep water in a cooler. I pour a little by the fence when I'm here. I don't know if it's anything, but it's something to do besides look away. I nodded like I understood, and maybe I did. He rolled his window up halfway and waved me on. I drove under the metal arch and watched it get small in the rear view. For half a second, no more, the upright, black shape of the arch's shadow lined up with the edge of my mirror so perfectly that my chest hurt, and then it was gone, and it was only a shadow like every other shadow thrown by a solid object on a bright day. I'm telling you this because I want it out of my head, and because if you've heard of the Watcher and felt that itch that says go see, maybe this will serve instead. Not as a warning exactly, as a description. There's a place on the far edge of the cemetery where the ground dips and the wind walks faster. And if you stand there at the wrong hour, you will feel your attention turn into a rope someone else holds. You might never see a thing move. You might only notice that when you look away, the world comes back a hair's breadth different, and you don't have language for the change. It's late as I type this. My apartment is quiet. The fridge hums. There's a faint rhythmic tick in the wall that is surely the neighbor's ceiling fan walking through the studs. In the window across the courtyard, a TV throws blue-white light. When I look straight at it, it's a rectangle like 100 others. When I look at the screen reflected in the dark of my own window, the rectangle is a tall vertical smear beside the sill, the exact height of a person standing there with their hands at their sides. I am not asking for advice. I'm not asking you to believe me. I only want to set it down. If you ever go to Lubbock to leave a pick for Buddy, you'll feel a tug to walk west where the ground turns sandy and the grass thins. You'll see the lot beyond the chain link, and you'll tell yourself the dark shape at the edge is a post or a man or an old hackberry you never noticed. Maybe it will be. Maybe you'll go home and sleep fine. Maybe you'll be like me and notice that in the corner of your eye, the world wants to be bigger than your ability to hold it. If you look at it head on, all you'll ever get is fence and field and a straight, honest sky. But in the blink between looking left and right, you will feel, with the authority of something that has placed a hand on your shoulder, that you are not supposed to face it directly. Not because it will hurt you, because that's not how seeing works with some things. That's not how they want to be seen. I keep a bottle of water by my window now. Sometimes I pour a little in the potted plant on the sill, and sometimes I pour a little onto the concrete outside and don't pretend it's for the flowers. I sleep with the chair leaned under the door like Oscar. I know it won't stop anything real. It just tells me that I understood the lesson. When I wake in the night and the darkness feels slightly rearranged, I don't sit up fast to catch something moving. I lie very still and count my breaths and listen to the refrigerator hum, and the building settle and the wind thumb the siding. I let it be where it is, at the far edge of my vision. I let it do its job, whatever it is, a tally, a head count, a presence for the ones without stones, and I do mine. I remember them. I remember that the ground dips out there and the fence sings and the sun makes silhouettes clean. And sometimes, if I turn my head too quickly, I feel again the world stutter. And I know in that small stolen slice of time that the Watcher has taken a half step I'll never see. I don't think it's following me. I think it just wants company. And most nights, whether I like it or not, I give it mine. I don't care if anyone believes me. I just need to put this down somewhere other than my own head. I've tried telling it out loud a few times, but when I hear the words, the room gets too quiet and people stop breathing. Typing feels safer. And if anyone from Waxahachie ends up reading this and wants to say I'm exaggerating, fine. But I know what I felt. And I know what I heard sliding along the gravel that night like a dress that never learned how to stop moving. I grew up 2 towns over, in Red Oak, and if you live anywhere near Ellis County, you already know about the catfish plantation. It's this old blue Victorian house on Water Street they turned into a restaurant. Chicken fried steak that will put you down for a nap, iced tea in mason jars, catfish with a batter the color of Texas dusk. People also say it's haunted, but around here everything older than your grandma is haunted if it so much as creaks. I'd eaten there a dozen times without seeing anything worse than a piece of cornbread I dropped face down. The cemetery is what I didn't know about. Not really. I mean, I knew there are cemeteries everywhere. They're like hardware stores and vape shops. If you don't need one, you stop seeing them. But there's a small one tucked a short walk from the restaurant, behind a stand of pecan trees, and that's where this starts, and maybe where it followed me from. It was late September, warm even at dusk. The kind of evening where you don't feel the sweat so much as you wear it. I was meeting my sister Lena and our friend Miguel for a bite before Miguel's night shift. He's a nurse at the hospital off 77 and has this talent for turning serious faces into normal ones again just by talking. We picked the catfish plantation because it made Lena feel better to eat in a place with white wire porch chairs and kind-eyed servers who call you hun. Inside smelled like hot oil and lemons. The ceiling fans ticked, doors ghosted open and shut in a way that made the waitstaff laugh instead of jump. You know how small towns are? The waitress knew my mom's cousin and the guy bussing the tables knew Miguel from high school. Somebody's uncle in the corner told the server that the cake was a sin on a plate, and then everyone around him told their own favorite sin. It was nice, comfortable. The only odd thing was the occasional whiff of perfume, old-fashioned and powdery, like you opened a cedar chest that hadn't breathed in years. I assumed it was the lady at the table behind us, the one with the cameo brooch and a voice like warm butter. We ate too much. When the check came, Miguel stretched and said he had 30 minutes before he needed to clock in. "Y'all want to walk?" he said, because he never likes to go straight from laughter to fluorescent hospital lights. "There's a cemetery over that way, small, real old stones. Kinda pretty." Lena wrinkled her nose. "You're weird, Mig. True, but it's nice at dusk. Quiet in the right way." I didn't have an opinion and my feet wanted to move. We told the hostess we'd be back for pie and she said, "Don't let the old lady spook you," with a wink that made my stomach float a little. Locals love their stories like they love their biscuits. The light outside was that strange gray-blue just before street lamps crack on. We crossed Water Street and cut behind the pecans where the cicadas were drilling the heat into small, manageable pieces. There was no dramatic gate or arch. You sort of step through wild grass and then you're among the stones, which are closer together than you'd think and lean in a way that feels like you walked into a conversation people were having about you. "See?" Miguel said. "Pretty," he meant it. The markers were different heights and ages, some with lambs, some with carved hands pointing up, a few with those porcelain photos that refused to yellow. You could tell which families still came because their plots had those whirligig pinwheels and little ceramic angels with repaired wings. The air changed as soon as we crossed in. Cooler. The kind of cool you only get near water or inside a church that sighs when you push the door. My arms pebbled. Miguel smirked like he'd predicted it and Lena rubbed her forearms. "You feel that?" she said. "Cold spot," Miguel said, teasing, science voice ready. "Probably just a breeze channeling through the trees." There wasn't a breeze. The leaves were still. The only movement was a dragonfly that bobbed like it was on a string. I told myself the temperature thing was a trick of shadow and light, the way heat leaves a place even before sun does. We wandered. We read names out loud and whispered "oh" at the ages that didn't get past 1 or 2. You try not to do math in a graveyard, but you do. You add and subtract and put yourself between dates like a bookmark. About 5 minutes in, I noticed the smell again. Not fried catfish and lemons, perfume, the old-fashioned kind. It threaded through the cooler air and made me think of my grandmother's dressing table. Cut glass bottles with stoppers. A silver brush with hair that never stopped showing up. A bowl of faded potpourri that smelled like someone else's house. I looked around for a woman walking a dog or another visitor. Just us. Miguel was crouched reading a stone with a chipped corner. Lena was squinting at a fence where vines had braided the iron into something softer. Then I felt pressure on my left hand, like someone who didn't want to spook me, placed their fingers just there, on the inside knuckles and took them away a second later. It wasn't the brush of a plant. It wasn't a bug. It was the weight of skin. I made a noise that I will insist forever was a word, and both of them looked up. "Ant?" Miguel said. "No," I said. It felt like I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to be the one to open the door to the story. "Like someone took your hand," Lena said, voice too light. I nodded. She swallowed, then said, still too light, "Maybe you looked like you needed it." We kept walking because that's what you do when your brain can't figure out whether to sit down or run away. The stones made a path without meaning to, and we followed it like kids pretending the tile grout is lava. Every few steps the temperature ticked down, then back up like we were moving through someone's breath. Miguel's shoes scuffed gravel that shouldn't have been there. Mexican plums dropped their small fruits at the edges. A street lamp blinked on then off, The dusk had softened into something that made the white marble glow even non-supernaturally. We found her grave by the way Lena stopped. Just stopped like she'd run out of yard. There wasn't a big monument or a carved angel crying into her elbow. The marker was simple and low, light-colored, with a name I won't share here because I did enough damage taking something I wasn't supposed to. The dates put her in the 1800s, and the etched words said she died on the same day she was married. The stone had a faint pale sheen that you could have blamed on the sky, except the sky was already pulling in the color of old denim, and this was white like something that wanted to be seen. Is that? Lena started, then clamped her mouth shut. That's pretty, she finished, a kid in Sunday school answering the safe question. Miguel, who loves explanations, said, limestone. Reflects the last light, or some phosphorescent lichen. There's a word for it. The word left him the second a sound brushed past us. I'm describing it wrong. It wasn't a sound that passed by like a car. It was more like the air decided to make a sound in slow motion. A whisper that wasn't words, a soft, dry, sweeping noise that had weight. If fabric made of memory could move, that's the sound it would make. The hairs on my neck stood up in a way that made me very aware of each one as an individual. Like they'd been called to attention by name. The hell, Miguel said, but softly. As if he'd been taught to cuss only inside of a church. We weren't alone. That's what the air said. We weren't alone, and we were being watched by something that didn't want to scare us, which made it worse. In the way a dog that stares without barking is worse than one that does. It's funny what your brain chooses at a moment like that. Mine decided that if someone had a flashlight, things would feel normal again. I'm going back, I said. Pie? Pie, Lena repeated like it was a life jacket. Miguel nodded, relieved that we'd picked the same thing. But the path we'd taken in didn't look like a path now. Everything got a little rearranged in the dusk. A Pepsi can that had been on one side of a stone migrated to the other. A fence post leaned a little more. We turned toward the trees and the restaurant glow we expected between their trunks. And in the space where you would put an exit if this was a story you can gently carry out of the room, there was a woman. I didn't see her first. I felt her. The way you feel a teacher standing beside you before you look up from your paper. Then the smell of perfume brightened until it was like someone had unscrewed a bottle. When I finally located the shape against the deeper dark, it was just that at first, a shape. Shoulder and skirt and the suggestion of a head turned the tiniest bit. As if she was looking past us at something more interesting. I didn't see a face. I want to be clear about that. I didn't see details and I didn't want to. But I saw the silhouette of a veil, and I saw how the air moved at her feet like it was remembering how to carry a dress. My mouth went dry. Miguel's hand found my wrist and squeezed so hard my watch face pressed a little circle into my skin. Lena said, hello, the way you do at a neighbor's fence when you can't see where their dog is, and then she wasn't there. Not the way a person leaves. The way heat leaves a stove. It was worse after somehow because the cold stayed for a second too long. Like it had to ask permission to go. Okay, Miguel said. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm taking us out. This way. He's trained not to panic. He guided us along a line of graves I had not noticed, where the grass was shorter and the ground felt firmer. We made it to the pecans and into the open. The restaurant porch lights looked like a row of small, sensible moons. Inside, the hostess didn't make a ghost joke. She looked at our faces and said, "Y'all doing all right?" With a seriousness that made me almost cry. We sat and ordered pie we didn't want, and Lena put both hands around her water glass like it was a heat source even though it was cold. Miguel kept starting sentences and then swallowing them. I tried to say that we'd just spooked ourselves, but the perfume threaded through the restaurant again, sharper now, and a server at the far station shivered like someone told a story in her ear. We left a big tip. On our way out, a woman with white hair sitting near the window said, "She's sweet mostly," to no one in particular. The man across from her said, "Uh-huh," in the way of men who have learned not to argue with old women. We didn't talk much on the walk to the cars. The cicadas had gone quiet like they do sometimes when they remember the world is big. At my car, Lena squeezed me and said, "You're okay," which is what you say to someone when you don't know if they are. Miguel promised he'd text when he got to the hospital. I watched them drive off and I stood another minute just listening to the night for anything other than what it had already said. At home, I showered like I'd been camping. I checked my hair for leaves and my pockets for pebbles, ridiculous, and found something that made the bottom fall out of me. It was a ribbon. Narrow, white, with a faint pattern of tiny raised dots. The kind you'd sew onto a dress or a handkerchief if you wanted to make it precious without making it loud. It was tied into a small bow like you'd see in an old photograph. The knot wasn't new. It felt like a knot that had been tied and untied and tied again until the fibers learned it. I hadn't put it in my pocket. The jeans were clean that morning. I stared at it on my palm until I had to blink. Then I put it in a drawer because that's what you do with things you don't understand. You give them a container and pretend that counts as safety. Sleep was a long gray hallway with too many doors. When I did drop, I dreamed about walking on gravel in shoes I couldn't see, with a dress brushing my legs that wasn't mine. I woke to my phone buzzing. Miguel, he never calls from work unless someone needs help or the vending machine stole his dollar. "You okay?" he said. It was 3 a.m, voices in his background, the electrical hum of hospital air. "I'm fine," I said, because that's always the first thing you try on. I had a patient in aid ask if she could move rooms. She said her roommate kept rattling her water cup. "She doesn't have a roommate, man." I laughed, the kind of laugh that's mostly air. "Maybe she meant the AC." "Maybe," he said, not believing it. We didn't say the word. We didn't say any of the words. We just promised each other again that we'd meet for breakfast after his shift. At the place with the chicken and waffles that taste better after the sun survives night. I woke late to a house that didn't feel like mine. The ribbon in the drawer took up more room by existing than the clothes did by being piled on the chair. I went into the kitchen to make coffee, and when I reached for the mug I use every morning, my fingers closed on empty air. The mug had shifted 3 inches to the left. That's it. Nothing dramatic. It sat on the counter 3 inches from where it should be. Handle turned toward where a left-handed person would grab it. I am not left-handed. I told myself that I had put it there and forgotten. I poured coffee and burned my tongue because I didn't wait. I never burn my tongue, I wait. That's my tiny morning discipline. But the feeling of someone being slightly ahead of me in my own movements rattled me, and I swallowed when I shouldn't have. At breakfast, Lena arrived with her hair in a messy bun that looked like it had been purposeful for a different day. "Tell me I imagined it," she said before she sat. "You both need to stop giving it oxygen," Miguel said, sounding like a man who had spent a night being polite to doors that opened by themselves. We decided, because we thought we could decide, to never go back. We decided not to tell the story and not to touch anything we didn't bring into our own houses, and to let the ribbon go wherever ribbons go when you forget them on purpose. I threw it away that afternoon. I wrapped it in paper towel like it could stain and took the trash out to the big bin. I watched the lid fall and I made myself walk away. That night my apartment was quiet and then it wasn't. You know the difference. Quiet as a ball. Not quiet as a bowl with something crawling up the inside. The neighbors upstairs rolled something heavy and then rolled it back. A car idled outside a second too long. My fridge kicked on. None of that is noteworthy. What is the sound that slid along my hallway like fabric that had been taught manners. It came from the bedroom to the kitchen, then stopped as if remembering where it was. I called Lena, which I don't do late because she wakes like a raccoon startled under a porch. She answered on the second ring. "You hear it too?" she said, like the end of a conversation we'd started years ago. "What did you hear?" "My hallway. Like my grandma used to walk when she thought we were still asleep, slow so her slippers wouldn't scuff." We stayed on the phone until both our voices got softer with relief that somebody else had a heartbeat. Around 2, we said goodnight. I lay in the dark trying not to practice the sound of footsteps in my head. The scent came then, so faint I could have called it a memory if it didn't land in my mouth like taste. The perfume. I turned on my side and told the room that I understood, that we had intruded, that we would not return, that whatever she was looking for wasn't in my house. It felt ridiculous and also like the most serious thing I had done in months. The next day I found the ribbon on my kitchen table. I swear I took the trash out. I swear I ate cereal standing up and did not put anything on the table except bills and my keys. The bow sat there like a friendly insect pretending not to be from another country. I didn't touch it. I backed away as if it might leap. Miguel stopped by after his shift with donuts he didn't eat. When he saw the ribbon, his mouth made a thin line. He doesn't like to admit defeat to things without charts. He sat and said, "We return it." "To where?" Lena said over speaker. "To a grave? You're talking about burying a ribbon like we're in a fairy tale." "Like we're decent," Miguel said. Like we're not the kind of people who take something and then complain that it wants to go home. We argued not because we liked arguing, but because the alternative was sitting still and listening. In the end, we decided something that feels different in daylight than it does later. We decided to take it back at dusk because that's when the grounds feel like they're paying attention. And because none of us wanted to be the one alone with it in our car when the sky was too bright for certain things to make sense. I didn't tell anyone else. There's only so many times you can say out loud that you followed a scent and a sound through a place built for endings, and came back with a bow. I took the table napkin the ribbon had somehow adopted, and wrapped it again like a present you give to someone you don't want to offend. I put it in my pocket and left it there, and if my keys somehow ended up in the other pocket even though I always keep them on the right, I didn't argue with that. We met near sunset. The restaurant had a line. People on the porch fanned themselves with menus and made jokes about how the ghosts better be good tonight if they had to wait this long. The same hostess was there. She looked at us with a small crease between her eyebrows and said, "Y'all here for pie again?" Like she wanted to give us an exit. "Just a walk," Miguel said. She nodded slowly. The pecans were black against a sky that couldn't decide between purple and gold. We crossed into the cemetery and the temperature stepped down like a careful person on stairs. The perfume found us before we found her. It drifted and then gathered, not overpowering, just very, very certain. We went straight to the grave because sometimes going around the long way makes you smaller. It glowed again in that not quite light way, and the gravel near it looked disturbed, like someone had tried to sweep in a circle and then given up. We didn't know what to do. There's no real instruction manual for this that isn't written by someone you don't want to be. Miguel cleared his throat and said, "We took something that was yours. I'm sorry." He reached for the ribbon and I caught his wrist without meaning to, not because I didn't want him to be the one to put it down, but because the act of reaching changed the air. The fabric sound came again from nowhere and also from just beside us. Lena squeezed my upper arm so hard I could feel the shape of her fingers later. The street lamp behind the trees flickered. It wasn't dramatic, but it took my breath anyway. I don't know why I did it the way I did. Maybe because I didn't want to put the ribbon directly on the stone like a cat dropping a bird at a door. I walked around to the back of the marker, where the grass was a little longer, and I tucked the bow under the stone so that one loop stuck out like a small, stubborn smile. The hair on my arm settled down. The cold eased a little. The smell warmed and then softened. I said without planning it, "You can keep it." "I'm sorry." We waited. You don't expect an answer until your bones ask for one. Then you stand there like an idiot waiting for wind to speak. What we got was the sound. It moved away from us this time, like the memory of a dress going down a hall, and it took with it a pressure I hadn't noticed until it lifted. "Okay," Lena whispered. "Okay." We left in the kind of silence that isn't empty. On the porch, the hostess looked up just as we came out of the trees. She kissed her palm and touched the doorframe. I don't know for who. That should have been the end. It would make a tidy story. People like tidy, because tidy means you can put it on a shelf and only take it down when you want to feel a little something and then go to bed. But tidy isn't how it works when you invite someone to walk with you. Even for a minute, the ribbon didn't come back. I haven't found it on my table or tucked into my mailbox or tied around my doorknob like a warning that thinks it's a gift. The perfume visits sometimes, usually when I'm least interested in being brave. I get out of the shower and the mirror is fogged, and there it is, old and soft and insisting. It doesn't scare me so much now as nudge me toward the part of my mind that doesn't believe in coincidence. The footsteps down my hall stopped the week after we returned the bow. But sometimes when I'm walking home from the corner store with milk and the sky is a color that doesn't belong to any season, I hear something to my left. Not on the sidewalk, not exactly. The suggestion of movement that is not mine. The smallest rustle, like fabric being considerate. Last week I was at the grocery store on Ferris Avenue because my brain decided at 8:30 p.m. that breakfast needed to happen now. I was in the baking aisle reading labels like there are bad eggs in the sugar, and I looked up because you do when the air changes. A couple walked past with a toddler in a dinosaur shirt. An older man compared prices on coffee like it was a test. No one looked at me. No one cared. And it came anyway. That cooling, that gentle shift, that scent that makes you breathe through your nose and remember lace you never owned. I felt the lightest brush against my left hand exactly where it had been in the cemetery. Not a grab. Not a scare. like someone who never got to finish a walk had decided for a second to finish it with me. I stood very still. I said in my head, and maybe a little out loud, "I can't help you, because I can't." I don't know what she wants, other than what all of us want, which is to be where we were supposed to be. The touch went away. The air warmed. The coffee man pushed his cart squeak down the tile. The toddler said roar to a box of cake mix. Normal resumed like a show that had paused. I pay attention more now. To doors that swing a fraction wider than I push them. To the way some nights are cooler in the middle than at the edges. To the sound of skirts when no one's wearing one. Lena says she doesn't dream about her anymore, and I believe her mostly. Miguel doesn't talk about it because he knows how to carry things without telling the world what's in the bag. But he texts me sometimes at strange hours with just a comma, which is our way of saying, "Are you hearing it too?" I haven't gone back to the cemetery. Not because I'm scared exactly. Because it feels like going to someone's house and knocking after they already walked you to the gate. But I drive past the catfish plantation once in a while, and the porch looks the same in every season. I think about the young bride who never got past the first day of the rest of her life, who might be moving between the house and the stones because nobody told her she doesn't have to. I think about the ribbon under the marker, and whether it has dirt on it now, whether it's becoming part of the ground the way we all do. Sometimes in the quiet before I fall asleep, I hear gravel, and I refuse to decide whether it's a truck down on the road or something that learned your footsteps and wants to keep pace. I don't invite anything in, and I don't tell it to leave. I just listen. And somewhere not very far from my house, not very far from the blue Victorian and the pecan trees that hold their breath at dusk, the faintest rustle keeps me honest. If I pay attention, I can tell the difference between my own sheets and a dress that will never get where it was going. I can tell when perfume is in the room and when it's only in my head. Most nights there's nothing. Most nights the air is only air, but if you ever find yourself walking near Water Street when the day is learning how to end, and the heat lifts off your shoulders like a shawl and you smell something that belongs to a century, that didn't invite you, don't say hello. Don't be rude either. Just let the space beside you be empty or not. Keep your hands where they hang, and if you feel another set brush yours, remember that not everything that reaches wants to take. Sometimes it only wants you to keep walking until the gravel sounds like it's saying your name, and then very politely stops. I never planned on writing about this, but my sister asked me to put it somewhere that strangers might read it and maybe tell us what to do. I don't care if anyone believes me. This is for Ray and for Eli and for the quiet that our house used to have. If you know Huntsville, you already know the stories. If you don't, that's fine. I'll start at the part that matters. An old dirt road the locals call Demon's Road, and a little cemetery at the end of it with a name that sounds like a joke until you go there. Old Bragg. Back in July, when the heat felt like a wet towel everywhere you went, Eli and I worked the late shift at the same hardware store. Ray, my younger sister, had just moved in with me after a bad breakup and one of those jobs that promises commission once you get your pipeline set. It meant none of us had money for anything but air conditioning and cheap beer. It also meant we had evenings where boredom was a problem big enough to solve. The idea wasn't mine, it was Eli's. He's the kind of guy who says, "We'll just go look," and means he intends to poke a stick into whatever hole he finds. He grew up around Walker County and likes to play local tour guide when there's nothing else to do. He told us about Demon's Road while we were eating Whataburger in the parking lot after our shift. The paper wrappers going transparent with grease and the big orange W flickering like a slow heartbeat. "They say red-eye things run across the road," he said, talking with his hands as usual. "Engines cut out, radios pick up voices. A kid on a bike. And if you go to the cemetery, you don't take anything with you. You leave something. Coins, water, smokes, or you'll bring something back." Ray, who'd been staring through the windshield like the night had answers printed on it, glanced at me. She'd been fragile all week in that quiet, sideways way. He knew that. He wanted to pull her out. I wanted to pull her out. We were twin mistakes wrapped in concern. "Bragg is out toward the pines, right?" I asked. "Back past a subdivision," Eli said. "Turn off the main road and the asphalt goes to dirt. That's Demon's Road. Cemetery is at the end. Kids do dumb things there like shout at the headstones." "Don't do that," Ray snorted. "We're bringing an offering to a lawn full of strangers." "It's respect," Eli said. "You don't like the word offering, call it a courtesy." He wasn't wrong. Around here, those little courtesies get handed down like recipes. Don't whistle after dark. Don't point at grave markers. Don't take bottles from roadside shrines. We have a lot of ways to make ourselves feel like we have rules when the night has none. We took my truck because it was the least beat-up vehicle among us. It had a sun-faded red paint job and a seat that pinched my left thigh with a tear in the upholstery. The AC held its own if you didn't ask it to do miracles. I checked the gas, knocked the dust out of the floor mats, and tossed a few bottles of water in the back on pure habit. Ray, practical in a way that gets lost in her soft voice, wordlessly added a pack of menthols she kept for stress but never smoked. Eli patted his pockets, pulled out a handful of coins, and said he'd bring those. It felt like overkill for a short drive, but it made us feel like we were doing it right. The road there is nothing special until it is. You pass the prison lights first, the soft orange glow on the horizon like a sodium sunrise that never moves. You go by a few modest houses with porch lights and wind chimes that don't know how to be still even with no wind. You pass a gas station where the clerk knows the brand of dip you'll ask for before you speak. Then you turn off the road that suggests town and onto the one that shrugs it off. Asphalt to gravel to dirt, with big pines leaning in as if to hear what you'll say. We stopped where the dirt started. It wasn't a plan, just a pause. The truck idled with that old rattle that makes you think of loose bolts. Cicadas crowded the air. In the rear view, a dog trotted along the last stretch of asphalt, then lost interest and veered into someone's yard. The sky was still more purple than black. Eli unwrapped a peppermint and chewed like it was a negotiation. "Just be chill," he said, as if that ever needed to be said. "We'll go down, we'll stand there 10 minutes, we'll leave the stuff, and we'll come home. If we see the bike, we don't stop." "That's ridiculous," Ray said, but she smiled. It was the first time I'd seen the corners of her mouth fight their way up all week. I didn't know then that a smile can be the first piece of bait. Demon's Road isn't a dramatic thing. It's just narrow enough that you notice. It's just rutted enough that you slow down out of reflex. The pine needles make a soft, dirty carpet that slips under your tires like you're driving on the skin of something alive. My headlights pushed a bubble through the dark, and in that bubble were only dust motes, low branches, and sometimes glints that could have been eyes if you wanted them to be. A quarter-mile in, the radio cut to static. It was a nothing kind of static, the hum that usually lives between stations. Except we hadn't been between stations. We'd had some country song on low, mostly background for the cicadas. Now it was like the antenna had been dipped in sand. I flicked the dial back and forth. The scan found nothing. I turned it off and felt like I'd turned off a light in a strange room. "Normal," Eli said, leaning forward to peer over the dash like the hood might be hiding a mystery. "Happens. Power lines back there are junk. We're close." Ray rolled her window down a little. The air that came in smelled like pine and wet dirt, and underneath it something that was neither. It's hard to explain. A metallic breath. "The inside of a battery, do you hear that?" she asked. We all did. It was a bell. Not a church bell. Not a cowbell. A small bell. The kind you'd put on a bike so you don't run over pedestrians. It came from behind us at first, one clean ding, then another, then quiet. I glanced at the mirror and saw nothing but the tunnel of my taillights through dust. Then I saw a faint wobble of something reflective far back down the road. "Don't stop," Eli said, soft as a prayer. "I'm not," I said, though it sounded like a lie even to me. What I did do, it was automatic. Muscle memory was press the brake just enough to make the red lights flare. The shape behind us responded with a sudden speed up, like a night animal startled into motion. The bell rang again. I accelerated. The bike kept pace for 3 seconds that felt like a very long string held tight between hands. Then it fell away into the dust, as if the road had folded under it and swallowed it whole. No one said anything after that. We let the truck do the talking, and the truck said in shivers and rattles that you'll feel better when you can see an ending. A thin white fence appeared on the right. A gap in the fence. A small, mean-looking sign with bullet holes and a name you could read only if you already knew it. The headstones, some slender and tall, some squat and mean, came into view like teeth in an underbite. Old brag. I pulled off into the dirt turnout and let the engine idle a minute. I didn't want to turn it off. There are times your brain insists you do the normal thing so it can pretend the rules are still in place. But the only other thing in the world besides us was the cemetery, and it didn't care about our rules. I shut the truck off. The silence that followed wasn't silence, not really. It was the sound of cicadas and distant frogs, and one breeze that found our windows and tested them like a finger running along a countertop. It felt more honest than the static. We got out. The air sat on us. Eli put his coins in his palm, all nickels except for 1 quarter, and held them like a kid practicing choice. Ray had the menthols in her back pocket. I took 2 bottles of water from the bed and thought stupidly that etiquette required 2 because there were 3 of us. Gate math. We walked to the fence, and the fence let us in like it always had. The thing about a country cemetery is that it is both crowded and empty at the same time. There are stones with names that once filled rooms now sunk to their knees in dirt. There are fresh plots with flowers that startle you because color should not be that bright in a place that has agreed to be so gray. There are benches that someone thought they'd sit on and didn't. There are trees that have stood there so long they look like they have a right to be more permanent than you. And there is the feeling, if you are the kind of person who takes a feeling at face value, that everything here has a very long memory, but it is not interested in using it on you unless you ask. We made it near the middle before Eli stopped. There was no reason to stop there except that he did. He knelt and set his coins on a flat stone that belonged to a person who had lived before indoor plumbing. Was a normal idea. He did it with a small nod like he'd completed a handshake. Ray pulled the cigarettes out and laid them on the corner of a different stone, the plastic crinkling in the heavy air. I screwed the caps off both bottles and set one at the base of a third. "You're really doing it," Ray said, and I understood what she meant. It's one thing to talk about offerings and curses in a car full of air conditioning. It's another to perform a small ritual with your hands, to place your breath's condensation on plastic at the feet of a stranger who will never need to drink anything again. "Yeah," I said. "We're being polite." The bell rang once more, closer now. We all turned toward the road. There was no bike, no boy, but there was a shape in the trees, a glimmer like eyes catching light, except there was no light to catch. It was at our shoulder height, too high for an animal unless an animal had decided to stand up. It slid sideways behind a trunk and was gone, the kind of gone that feels like a choice, not a mistake. Eli, who jokes about everything, didn't joke. "We good?" "Let's go," Ray said. "I'm not being cute." "Let's go," we walked back. That's when the mirror in the truck cracked. It was the passenger side sun visor mirror, the little one with the stained tan flap that Ray had tilted earlier to put on chapstick. It is not a dramatic mirror. It is not a place for drama. While we were still 6 feet from the truck, a sound like a dry slug of earth splitting made us look, and we saw the hairline fracture run from corner to corner like a white lightning bolt. It didn't shatter. It just decided to be broken. I said something like, "No way," because how else do you talk to coincidence when it laughs in your face? Eli was already in motion. He grabbed my sleeve and tugged, a rough motion for a guy who is all loose joints and jokes. Ray wasn't moving. Her head was tilted just slightly sideways like she was listening to someone explain a great secret. "Ray," I said, "stop." "There's someone in the truck," she said very calmly. In the back, I did the worst thing. I looked. The back seat had the outline of my toolbox and a sweater Ray keeps for movie theaters that go too hard with their AC. The dome light makes that yellow a yellow you never see anywhere else. There was no person. There was, for a half second, the impression of weight in the way the sweater slumped. Then it was just a sweater. "You're seeing a reflection," Eli said, but he said it with nothing behind it. We piled in. I turned the key. The engine coughed like it had water in its lungs and stalled. My hands were suddenly very dumb at my wrists. I took the key out and put it back in and turned it again. It coughed, stuttered, died. The third time it started and continued to do the thing engines do. The radio came on by itself, not to the country station but to static. And in the static was a voice under the sand. Not a word I could parse. Just the cadence of a person far away in the wind. We left. I don't remember how fast. The kind of fast your body says is reasonable, because it wants distance to be a thing you can measure with numbers. The road in the mirror flowed backward into dark like tape spooling into a reel. We passed the fence. We passed the bent sign. We passed the spot where the bell had sounded strongest. We hit asphalt. We drove into town like we were fleeing a weather system that wasn't paying attention to maps. At home, the house was only an ordinary house for 10 minutes. We cracked a couple of beers and sat in the living room with the TV on low to an old sitcom where everybody laughs in the same tone. There's comfort in a canned laugh. Then my dog refused to come in. I'd let him out when we got back. His name is Buster, and he's the mutt you picture when you hear the name. He has a bad habit of scanning the fence line like he's waiting for mail. Usually, the sound of the fridge opening is enough to get him inside no matter what he's doing. I stood at the back door and called, "Buster." He looked at me and he didn't move. He whined, but not at me. At the doorway. At the space inside the house that he had occupied every day of his short dog life. He backed away a step and sat down. His ears did that thing where they try to tuck into his head. I whistled. I offered a piece of deli turkey from the drawer. He didn't care. He tried to lie down and then thought better of it and stood again. Ray joined me. She crouched at the threshold and held her hand out. He licked her fingers like a formality, then whined again. "Something's in there," she said, and it was not a joke. We left the door open. I couldn't stand the idea of closing it on him, like shutting a door on a person in a burning room. We sat back down and looked at each other over the TV light. The canned laughter sounded forced. Eli kept saying, "It's nothing," and each time he said it, it came out thinner like a copy of a copy. The first mirror cracked the next afternoon. It was the one in the hall, the cheap full length that hooks over the door. There had been no movement near it. There had been no pressure, no slam, nothing. There was a sound like a knuckle pressed hard into a jaw, and the glass traced a milk vein from left hip to right shoulder. I was standing in the kitchen. Ray was in the shower. Eli had gone home to change. I walked toward the sound and had the sick, stupid thought that if I moved slowly enough, I'd catch whatever was doing it. We didn't go back to the cemetery right away. That seems like the obvious thing to do in a story like this. Go back, apologize, bring more offerings. But we were too proud and too sore around our pride. If something had followed us, the last thing we wanted to do was feed it a second time. We argued about it over cold eggs and warm coffee. Eli said it was coincidence. Ray said nothing at all for long stretches and then said one sentence that felt like it had been loaded beforehand. It didn't like the menthols. We checked the driveway. The bottle of water I'd left had a soft thumbprint in the plastic that wasn't mine. The coins were still in Eli's pocket. He'd meant to leave them and forgot. I didn't argue with the conclusion that presented itself. That night the smell came. Not the pine and battery smell from the road. A sour old wet smell like rained-on cardboard left on a porch and forgotten until it fused with the wood. It came from the living room in a wet bloom that didn't care about the AC vent. Buster hunkered in the doorway like a guard posted outside a room he knows better than to enter. The TV remote refused to respond 4 times in a row, then turned the volume up on its own so that the canned laughter drowned out our voices for a moment. That was when Ray said, "We have to go back." Eli came over with a stack of quarters and a new pack of cigarettes and a cheap disposable camera like people use at weddings to feel nostalgic. He'd written on the side of it with Sharpie, "Proof." He looked sheepish about the label but didn't erase it. He's like that. He'll name it and fight the embarrassment like it's another person. "Tonight?" he said. "Before tonight," I said. "Before it gets dark." We didn't wait for sunset. We got in the truck at 3 in the afternoon, when light makes every problem feel like something that can be fixed with a trip to a hardware store. I checked the oil, because checking the oil is what men in my family do when the world is not fixed by checking locks. The dipstick came up with a tiny smear that looked like a fingerprint placed with care. I wiped it on a rag and didn't mention it. We drove. The road was kinder in daylight. The pines were pines again, and not a row of faces leaning in to listen. The dirt did not feel like skin. The bell did not ring. The radio worked, and we turned it off anyway. The cemetery in the sun looked like all the cemeteries you pass without thinking. A couple of stones had fresh flowers. Someone had tied a ribbon on a fence post that moved like it had a pulse. There was a woman in her 60s talking quietly to a stone and watering the patch of grass in front of it from a gallon jug she'd brought. She glanced up at us and then back down like we were simply weather. We walked to the stones we'd left things by. The water bottle I'd put down was half empty. No dog had been at it, no ants. An evaporation line like a tide mark was visible if you tilted it just right. The menthols were gone. Eli's coins weren't there because he'd never left them. He took a breath like he was about to touch something hot and knelt and placed $1 in quarters on the flattest stone he could find. He made a point of not picking up anything else. He left the pack of regular cigarettes next to where the menthols had been. He set the camera on the stone, and for a ridiculous second, I thought he was going to leave it as an offering. Instead, he took a picture. The shutter sound on those disposable cameras is sharper than you think it will be. The woman with the water glanced over again. I think we needed to say sorry, Ray said. She put her hand on the top of a stone like you do at a friend's door. The ground under her hand pulsed. I know that's a bizarre word to use for dirt and rock, but it did. A soft, patient thump like the underside of a bass in a club, low enough that you don't hear it so much as feel it try to rearrange your bones. She snatched her hand back and smoothed her palm down the side of her jeans like she'd got something sticky on it. We all looked at each other like we'd agreed to be in this lie together. Eli took one more picture. The woman finished watering and walked to the gate. As she passed us, she stopped and gave us a once-over. It wasn't unkind. It was the look you give kids who are trying to act older than they are. You don't take things from here, she said. You don't even take your own shadow if it wants to stay. Leave water. Leave smokes. Coins if you have them. If something likes you, you leave your pride too. We left things, I said, sounding more defensive than I wanted. She nodded like a teacher who has heard a decent answer and has another question ready. And did you remember to ask for your names back? She said. We must have looked like stray cats blinking at a porch light. She gave a half smile, not cruel, and lifted her jug a little as if in cheers. You talk when you leave, she said. You say your name and you say you're going. Else you'll be called when you don't want to be. Don't ask me how I know. Good day. She left. The ribbon on the post moved again. The sun made the stones look clean as bones. We said our names like kids at roll call. I felt ridiculous. Eli said his in a louder voice than necessary, as if volume made it more official. Ray said hers like a whisper to a friend. We stood for a minute longer and then started back toward the truck. On the way, Eli bent to pick up a coin without thinking. I said don't, and he froze with his fingers around it and then let it go. The coin lay there like a completed sentence. The truck started on the first turn. The radio played an old song my dad used to whistle. Buster met us at the door when we got home and trotted inside without a complaint, nosed his water bowl, and looked expectantly at the treat jar with his ears forward like an apology had been accepted. We exhaled in the same rhythm and laughed, not at a joke but at a pressure lifting that we hadn't realized was sitting on our ribs. That night, the house was good. We stayed up late not because we were afraid, but because you don't walk away from a reprieve. Eli fell asleep on the couch with a baseball game low on his phone. Ray curled up in the chair with a blanket and half-finished cross-stitch she'd been pretending she didn't care about. I took a shower that felt hotter than our water heater is usually willing to give. The mirror did not crack. The TV did not turn itself up. The smell in the living room was only the smell of dog and lemon cleaner. I slept with the window cracked because the air finally felt like it could be trusted. In the morning, there was a quarter on the kitchen table I didn't remember putting there. It was tails up. If that made me cold, I told myself it was because I needed coffee. We went about our day. Eli left for work. Ray took her laptop to the porch and made polite noises at recruiters over video calls. I went to the store and sold a shovel to a man who told me 3 long stories about digging holes that had nothing to do with the shovel he was buying. When I came home, the quarter had moved. It was heads up, and it sat in the exact center of the mirror in the hallway, balanced against the glass like someone had pressed it there and let go at the perfect moment. The cracked line in the glass intersected the coin's edge. I called for Ray. She answered from the porch. I didn't touch the coin. I did what men in my family also do when locks and oil and shovels don't fix anything. I pretended I hadn't seen it. That evening, Eli texted a picture he'd gotten from the developer at the drugstore. The disposable camera prints rubber-banded together. The cemetery in the afternoon is a nice place in a photograph. The camera doesn't know better. There are 3 shots of the old stones, 2 of the fence with the ribbon, 1 of my truck with the sun flaring off the windshield, and 1 of the water bottle with the tide mark. And there is 1 that is of us. We had not taken a picture of ourselves. The angle is from waist height, as if a kid was holding the camera and pointing it up, or as if the camera had been set on a stone and then picked up by nothing. In it, we are standing in a triangle, heads tilted toward each other like conspirators. You can see Eli's Sharpie writing on the camera because he's holding it in his hand, so this must have been before the last shot he took. You can see Ray's hand on the top of a stone. Her palm is flat, and you can see the air above her palm, which is not empty. There is a ripple there, a heat mirage in a place that is not hot. If you stare, you see what looks like fingertips pressing down from the other side of a thin film. It is not fake. It is not good enough to be fake. It is what happens when the corner of the world forgets to lie. We didn't go back a third time because we didn't know what we'd say. Please stop, maybe. We're sorry again. We'll bring menthols even though Ray hates them. The house stayed mostly quiet. The dog stayed inside. The mirror stayed cracked but did not crack again. The quarter moved from the hallway to the kitchen to the bathroom counter, and then to the top of the bookshelf where we keep books that we pretend we'll read again but won't. Every time it moved, it changed orientation, heads, tails, heads, as if someone was flipping it to pass time. We never caught it in motion. It was simply somewhere else doing its little coin trick like it wanted to be noticed and not examined. A week went by. I started to think that Ordinary had returned wearing a mask we could live with. Then our doorbell rang at 3:17 a.m. Our doorbell is not a deep note. It's the cheap ding of something that came free with a kit. It sounded like a metal spoon tapped on a jar. I woke up and didn't move, listening for the second ring. It came, and then a third, intense in the way repetition makes anything feel more purposeful. I got up. Ray was already in the hall, hair tangled, eyes up. Buster stood with his head cocked, ears up, tail not moving. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't excited. He was listening to a thing he knew by now not to chase. "Don't open it," Ray said. "I didn't. I checked the peephole. Peepholes make people into fish in a tank. Their faces warped and silly. There was no face. There was the empty porch and the damp ring the mat gets when the night sweats. The faint glow from the streetlight lit the steps well enough that if someone had been there, they would have been a suggestion at least. There was no suggestion. The bell rang again. It sounded further away, like it was coming through water. I stood there until the air conditioning cycled off and the house made that soft, settling sound old houses make, a wood sigh. The bell did not ring a fifth time. The clock over the stove said 3:21. I sat on the stairs. Ray sat 2 stairs below me like we were kids again, listening for Mom's car. Eventually, we went back to bed and didn't sleep but lay very still pretending. In the morning, there were bike tracks in the dew on the sidewalk, thin lines with a zigzag like a kid does when he wants to feel the texture of a path under his tires. They came from nowhere we could point to and ended at our steps. A coin sat on the 3rd step, heads up. I left it there. Eli came by with an expression he tries to hide that means he's thinking about God, even though he says he doesn't. We didn't tell him about the bell. We didn't have to. He lifted his phone and played a voice memo from 3:17 a.m. 3 soft chimes, a sound like someone breathing in, and static shaped into a shape too close to words to be comfortable. We tried to research. Research is the way modern people pray. We found 100 stories, bells, eyes, kids on bikes, cars stalling like posed photographs, offerings, mirrors that don't hold, people who say going there is an invitation, and people who say staying away is a dare you shouldn't accept. We didn't find a solution that sounded like anything other than an appeasement. Ray started sleeping on the couch with the TV low because the laugh track made the quiet feel occupied. The quarter stayed on the 3rd step. Buster would go up the stairs 2 at a time, and then pause at the top and look back as if to check if we were following. He stopped doing that thing where he dreams with his legs running. Dogs are honest when they are afraid. He wasn't afraid. He was watchful. That can be worse. Last night we tried something else. I don't know why I thought it would be smart. Maybe because my dad used to say names matter. Maybe because the woman at the cemetery had asked us about ours. I took the quarter from the step and set it on the kitchen table. I said my name aloud. I said it like I was telling the room, like I was marking a piece of territory with sound. The quarter flipped by itself. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't leap. It was a small hop, a flip like someone had just barely moved their nail under the edge and let it go. It landed heads up again. I said Eli's name. It flipped tails. I said Ray's name. It didn't move. Then the bell rang once, not from the door, not from outside, but from somewhere in the house where bells aren't supposed to be. In the same breath, the light over the stove flickered and made that little noise fluorescent lights make right before they go, a tiny gasp. Ray's voice came from the hall. "Don't," she said, and I didn't know if she was talking to me or to the air or to herself. We're back to that space where we keep the TV on, and the dog watchful and the front doormat dry because I checked the weather and it isn't supposed to rain. The quarter is on the bookshelf again, heads up. The mirror in the hall wears its white crack like a scar that got told a story. Eli says he'll come by tonight and we'll go sit on the porch until the sun makes the sky pale. He says things settle if you give them time and don't call them. I want to believe him because believing him means I can imagine sleeping with the window cracked again. I don't have a lesson to end this with. I have something that feels more like a question. We were told to leave things at Old Bragg so the spirits would take those instead of taking from us. We brought water and cigarettes and coins. We left them like strangers leaving a tip for good service. But we also took something without meaning to. Not an object. Something thinner. A name said in the wrong order. A pause at the wrong gate. A look in a mirror that's not yours. And now there's a polite little bell in our house and a coin that likes to be noticed, and a dog that won't lie in the living room after 9. If you go down that road, be respectful. Don't whistle. Don't shout. Don't slam your doors. And when you leave, say your name like you're bringing it with you. Say it once for the air and once for whatever listens between trees. Make it clear who you're taking home. Because I've started to think there's a boy out there who doesn't need a ride so much as he needs a follow. And he has a bicycle bell that can ring inside walls. And he knows how to flip a coin to pass the time until someone opens the door.